Your gums are constantly sending you signals about your health. So today, we're going to create a kind of visual guide to help you understand what they're trying to tell you, from what perfect health looks like to the very first warning signs that something's up.
Okay, let's get right into it. We all hear about keeping our gums healthy, but what does that really mean? Before we dive into the problems, we've got to establish a clear picture of what we're actually aiming for. What's the goal?
And here it is. This is what we're shooting for. This right here is our benchmark, a state of perfect periodontal health. Just think of this as the strong, solid foundation that your teeth need to last a lifetime.
So, let's break this down a bit more. First, we'll look at the official definition of healthy, and then we'll get into the practical signs that you should be seeing when you look in the mirror.
This official definition is actually pretty cool. It's not just about, not having a disease. It's about being able to function, to eat, to speak, to smile, without any worry or negative fallout from it. It's really about total well-being.
So this slide basically turns that formal definition into a practical checklist. At home, you're looking for a nice, uniform pink color. The tissue should be firm and kind of resilient. And here's a big one. 0 bleeding. The gum line should hug the tooth snugly, and the papilla, that's that little triangle of gum between your teeth, should look like a perfect little pyramid.
Okay, so now that we've seen the ideal, that peaceful kingdom, let's introduce the main troublemaker. It's something that forms in all of our mouths every single day, and it's called dental biofilm.
You probably know it as plaque, but a better way to think of it is as a living, sticky blanket of germs that's always trying to set up camp on your teeth. And if you don't remove it, your body's defense system sees it as a foreign invader and sounds the alarm, which kicks off inflammation. So what happens when that biofilm isn't managed and your body's alarm starts blaring? Well, that's when the first battle begins. It's called gingivitis, and let's take a look at what that battle actually looks like.
And this comparison is just perfect. On the left, you've got that calm, healthy state we started with. But on the right, well, you can literally see the signs of the body's immune system kicking into gear. The fight is on. The first thing you're going to notice is the color change. The tissue goes from that nice, healthy pink to a really distinct red. And why does that happen? Because your body is rushing more blood to the area to get its immune cells to the front line to fight those biofilm invaders. That swelling you see is called edema.
Remember how we said healthy gums are firm? Well, with gingivitis, that all changes. The tissue loses that nice, firm consistency because of all the inflammation and fluid. It becomes soft, almost spongy if you were to press on it.
Healthy gums often have this subtle texture, kind of like an orange peel. But when the tissue swells up with all that inflammation, it gets stretched tight and can start to look really smooth and shiny.
And this is absolutely crucial. Bleeding is never normal. It is a direct, undeniable sign of active inflammation. What's happening is the lining of the gum pocket gets really thin and fragile, so the blood vessels break super easily, even with just gentle pressure from your toothbrush.
But here's the most important thing to remember about this whole stage. The really good news is the gingivitis is completely reversible. Yeah, the body sounded the alarm, but no permanent damage has been done yet. If you get on top of that plaque removal, your gums can go right back to being perfectly healthy.
Now, while that biofilm is always the trigger, it's not always the whole story. Sometimes your body's reaction can be, well, let's say a little exaggerated because of other things going on. Let's look at what can really turn up the dial on inflammation.
Think of it like this. The biofilm starts the fire, but certain other factors can act like gasoline. They don't cause the problem on their own, but man, they can make the body's inflammatory response way more intense, even if there's only a little bit of plaque.
This is exactly why your gums might feel extra sensitive or bleed more during puberty or pregnancy or at certain times of the month, even if you're cleaning your teeth perfectly. And it's also why big things like smoking, certain meds, or poorly controlled diabetes can have such a huge impact. They actually change how your body responds to the biofilm.
Now, everything we've talked about so far has been focused on the most common type of gum issue, the one caused by that dental biofilm. But it's really important to know that's not the only kind out there.
This chart lays it out perfectly. There are two main paths. Our entire conversation has been about what's on the left side, the stuff induced by biofilm. But there's a small percentage of cases that fall into the category on the right, and those won't get better just by brushing and flossing more.
So while these other, more rare causes definitely exist, the main takeaway here is that for the vast majority of us, mastering that relationship between plaque and our body's response
That is the absolute key to gum health.
So your gums are talking to you every single day. That redness, the swelling, any bleeding, those are not things you just ignore. They are clear signals begging for your attention. Understanding these signs is step one. The real question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Thanks for watching.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a literal microscopic biological thriller, and it's happening right now inside the mouths of millions of people. You know, when we think of gum disease, we usually just picture it as this straightforward bacterial infection, right? Like the germs are just eating away at the teeth. But the reality? Well, the reality is far more dramatic than that. It actually involves a high-stakes, absolutely devastating sacrifice made by your very own immune system.
47%. Nearly half of all adults over the age of 30 suffer from periodontitis. Let that sink in for a second. It is the #1 cause of tooth loss in adults. And yet, the actual mechanism behind why those teeth fall out is completely, and I mean completely, misunderstood by most people.
So here is the wild central paradox we are unraveling today. It is actually not the bacteria alone that causes the tissue destruction. It's your body's response to those bacteria. Your host immune response operates on this ruthless, scorched earth military strategy. It will literally destroy the supporting bone and connective tissue around the tooth just to stop the bacterial invaders from spreading deeper into your bloodstream. Basically, it destroys the village to save the host.
Okay, let's dive into this. On our agenda today, we're going to cover 1. The Great Immune Betrayal. 2. Bacterial invaders and virulence. 3. The biochemical battleground. 4. The bone remodeling cycle. 5. When dental implants fail. And finally, 6. Measuring the clinical aftermath.
Starting right off with Section 1, the Great Immune Betrayal, protecting the host, not the tooth.
So everything begins with what is actually a normal, highly protective response. You get a microbial invasion, and your body sends in the first responders. That's your acute inflammation. Normally, once the threat is neutralized, your body initiates a process called catabasis. Think of catabasis as hitting the off switch on the inflammation so everything can return to a healthy, balanced state. But in periodontitis, that switch gets completely stuck. The acute response doesn't shut down. Instead, it progresses into sustained chronic inflammation. It's the biological equivalent of burning down your entire house just to kill a spider. Your defenses get stuck in the on position, constantly attacking the periodontium, the gray gums and bones supporting your teeth. Which brings us to Section 2, Bacterial Invaders and Virulence, the Instigators.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the specific type of bacteria we're dealing with. They're gram-negative, and these aren't just your run-of-the-mill germs. They carry highly specialized virulent defenses. Specifically, they have these endotoxins, like lipopolysaccharides, or LPS for short, embedded right on their outer membranes. It is this exact structural protein that sounds the massive, blaring alarm in your body, kicking off that severe inflammatory response we just talked about.
But they don't just ring the doorbell and run. They're fully equipped to do some serious damage. Beyond the LPS, certain bacterial strains, like P. gingivalis, actually have the ability to physically invade your tissues. This allows them to effectively hide from and escape your host defenses. Furthermore, they produce their own enzymes, specifically collagenases and proteases, that literally chew up and degrade the host proteins making up your gums. I mean, they are highly evolved to outsmart us at every single turn.
Let's zoom in even closer for Section 3, the biochemical battleground, the mediators.
So the crucial point here is understanding exactly who is doing what in this microscopic war zone. We basically have 3 main biochemical culprits, and they're sent by your own host cells. First, cytokines. They act as the signaling and recruitment officers. They increase vascular permeability and call in the cellular troops. Then we have prostaglandins, specifically the E series, which act as the bone destructors by triggering the exact cells that eat away your jawbone. And finally, MMPs, or matrix metalloproteinases, which basically function as the connective tissue demolition crew.
And, you know, what's truly tragic here is that these MMPs, they are normally the good guys. In a state of health, MMPs facilitate the normal, totally healthy turnover of your connective tissues. It's a perfectly balanced system. But in disease, that regulation is completely suppressed. The balance is entirely lost, resulting in this excessive, uncontrolled breakdown of collagen. Like I said earlier, it is quite literally friendly fire on a massive scale.
All right, moving to Section 4, the bone remodeling cycle, breaking and building.
You have to remember, your jawbone isn't just static rock. It's constantly remodeling through these 4 distinct steps. First up is the resorption phase, where cells called osteoclasts clear away old bone. Then comes reversal, where they stop and send a signal to the building cells. Step 3 is formation, where those builders, the osteoblasts, lay down a new matrix, creating the foundational scaffolding for new bone. And finally, the resting phase. But remember those prostaglandins we just mentioned? Well, in periodontitis, they force that very first step, the resorption phase, into absolute overdrive. The osteoclasts just keep smashing down the bone, and the builders literally cannot catch up.
Let's look at how this plays out in the real world in Section 5, when dental implants fail, the clinical stakes. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when we try to replace the teeth lost to this disease. Look, dental implants are a massive, expensive investment for a patient. But if that patient has a history of periodontitis, that same aggressive host immune response can turn right around and attack the implants. It's a condition called peri-implantitis, and it can completely jeopardize the stability of these incredible restorations.
So, put yourself directly in the clinician's shoes for a second. If obvious mobility is detected in an implant crown, what is the absolute first thing a hygienist should do? You must immediately notify the dentist. Seriously, mobility is the first and absolute best indicator of implant failure. From there, the crucial next step is taking radiographs to figure out what's going on. Is it just a mechanical issue, like a loose internal screw that can easily be tightened? Or is it a biological failure where the bone has been destroyed by the immune system, meaning the implant has completely lost its integration with the jaw?
Let's move to and see how this builds into our final topic, Section 6, Measuring the Clinical Aftermath, Infrabony Defects. When the smoke finally clears from the immune system's attack, dental professionals have to step in and measure the structural damage. We call these leftover craters infrabony defects, meaning it's a vertical defect that falls below the crest of the bone. But here is a uniquely counterintuitive rule that you absolutely need to remember. These defects are classified based on the number of walls of bone that remain around the tooth, not the walls that were destroyed, but the ones still standing. Which leads us to the ultimate counterintuitive reveal. A one-wall defect sounds kind of minor, right? Just one wall? But no, it means only one wall is remaining, meaning 3 were destroyed. It actually has the worst possible prognosis. On the flip side, a 3-wall defect sounds like the most severe damage, but it actually offers the absolute best surgical prognosis. Why? Because it means 3 protective walls of bone successfully survived the immune system's scorched earth attack, providing a much better bowl-like foundation for regenerative surgical treatments to actually work.
So what does this all mean for us? We've seen today that periodontitis isn't just about bacteria munching on your teeth. It is a catastrophic breakdown in your body's own defense mechanisms. And because you really can't cure this hyper-responsive genetic tendency, managing it requires lifelong maintenance to prevent that harmful, dysbiotic biofilm, that sticky layer of toxic bacteria, from returning and pulling the fire alarm all over again. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Are you actively protecting your smile? Are you doing enough with your daily care to ensure your very own immune system doesn't turn its scorched earth tactics against you? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.
So you're in the dental chair, everything's going fine, and then you hear those 2 words that sound just a little bit scary. Deep cleaning. What on earth does that actually mean? Is it really that different from a regular cleaning? And more importantly, why do you need one? Well, today, we're going beyond the brush to get to the truth about the deep clean. It's a moment so many of us have had, right? Your dentist says you need something more than just a standard polish. It definitely sounds serious, but what's really going on in your mouth that your daily brushing and flossing suddenly can't handle? Well, the answer is hiding just below the surface.
You see, the real problem isn't the stuff you can see on the surface of your teeth. The real battleground for your oral health is happening in a place your toothbrush will never reach, that tiny, tiny space between your teeth and your gums. And that's where the real threat is hiding out.
And that threat, it has a name: plaque biofilm. Now, this is not just some leftover food. The most important word here is living. It's a sticky, super organized community of bacteria. Seriously, think of it like a colony of germs building their own little city on your teeth. And because it's a physical structure, you can't just rinse it away. It has to be physically knocked down.
And here is the core of the problem. Once that biofilm city starts expanding deep below your gum line into what dentists call pockets, your at-home tools become pretty much useless. Your toothbrush, your floss, even powerful mouthwash, they just can't get deep enough to break up these hidden bacterial strongholds.
So the official term for a deep clean is non-surgical periodontal therapy, or NSPT. And it's not just random scraping. It's a very precise treatment with 4 clear goals. First, you've got to minimize the bacterial challenge. That just means getting rid of those biofilm colonies. Second, control local factors, things like a rough filling that might be trapping plaque. Third is to minimize systemic risks by looking at your overall health, things like diabetes. And finally, the ultimate goal, stabilize the tooth's attachment. You do that by getting rid of the inflammation so your gums can heal and hold your teeth nice and tight. Okay, so what actually happens during this treatment? To really get what the modern approach is all about, it helps to take a quick look at how things used to be done. It's changed a lot. For a long, long time, dentistry operated under a mistaken belief. The idea was that bacterial toxins would actually soak into the outer layer of the tooth root. That's called the cementum, making it permanently diseased or necrotic. And this belief, it led to a really aggressive goal for treatment. The aim was to literally scrape away that entire outer layer of the root until it was, and this was the term, glassy smooth. The thinking was you had to remove all of it to get a clean surface for the gums to heal against. But here's the thing, we now know that's just not true. Modern science has shown us that the cementum is absolutely vital for healing. So the goal today is the exact opposite, to conserve as much of this precious tooth structure as possible. The focus now is just on disrupting the biofilm and removing the hard calculus, not stripping the root bare. It's a much smarter, more conservative approach. All right, so the deep clean is done. What happens next? What's going on inside your mouth now? Understanding this healing process is really key to managing your expectations. This slide lays out the healing journey perfectly. First, once the source of all that irritation, the deep biofilm, is gone, the inflammation starts to resolve. The redness and swelling go down. Then, the healthy gum tissue can readapt to that clean tooth root. And finally, your body creates a new seal called a long junctional epithelium. The best way to think of it is like a long, tight turtleneck collar forming around your tooth. And that's what makes the gum pocket shallower. Okay, but this is the #1 question patients ask. Your gums are healing, everything's getting better, but all of a sudden, a sip of cold water sends a zinger through your tooth. It seems totally backward, right? But there's actually a fascinating scientific reason for it. The best explanation we have is called the hydrodynamic theory. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. Underneath your tooth's enamel is a layer called dentin, and it's full of these microscopic, fluid-filled tubes, kind of like tiny little straws. When that surface gets cleaned off and exposed, a trigger like cold air causes the fluid inside those tiny straws to move, and that movement stimulates the nerve deep inside the tooth. So that jolt of sensitivity, it's not a sign of damage. It's just the nerve reacting to a brand new, super clean surface. A deep clean is a powerful reset for your gums, but keeping them healthy really depends on what you do every single day at home. So how can you protect that progress? Well, let's look at some high-tech tools designed for exactly that. A water flosser is way more than just a little squirt gun for your teeth. This diagram shows how it creates 2 cleaning zones at once. You've got the impact zone, where the main stream hits the tooth to break up plaque. But at the exact same time, it's creating a flushing zone, a gentle flow of water that goes deep into the gum pocket to clear out all the bacteria and debris your brush could never, ever touch. The science behind why this works so well is called hydrokinetic activity, and it's actually pretty clever. The secret is that the stream of water pulsates. This creates a rapid compression and decompression, like a tiny, super targeted pressure washer that physically blasts away that sticky biofilm in a way that a steady stream of water just can't. And the results? They're really well documented. People who use them see a huge reduction in all the bad stuff. Less biofilm, less bleeding gums, less inflammation. It even cuts down on the specific bad bacteria and inflammatory triggers that cause gum disease. Long story short, it just creates a much healthier environment in your mouth. So how does this technology actually stack up against the tools you're probably using right now? Let's put them head to head and see what the science says. Okay, now this slide. This is the real eye-opener. Just look at the data. A toothbrush or mouth rinse barely gets 1 or 2 millimeters below the gum line. Dental floss, even when you use it perfectly, might get you to 3 millimeters. But a water flosser can get down to 5-6 millimeters or even deeper. That is a massive difference. And it's exactly in those deeper pockets where the disease loves to hide.
And this is a really important point. A water flosser isn't just an easy mode for people who hate to floss. For a lot of people, it's actually an essential tool for situations where traditional floss just can't get the job done right. I mean, if you have any complex dental work, think implants, crowns, bridges, or especially braces, a water flosser is a total game changer. It can clean around all those nooks and crannies in a way that string floss just physically can't, which helps protect your investment and your health. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. A professional deep clean is like hitting the big reset button. It gets your mouth back to a state of health, but that reset is only as good as your follow-up. Effective daily home care is what keeps the problem from coming right back. So, after seeing just how deep these problems can go, and the real limitations of our normal tools, it leaves us with one pretty important question to ask ourselves. Is my daily routine truly reaching where it counts the most? Thanks for joining us for The Explainer.
All right, welcome. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty wild link that most of us just never think about. The one between our overall health and what's actually going on inside our mouths. And a little spoiler here, this goes way, way beyond just brushing and flossing.
So let me just ask you, do you think gum disease is really just about whether or not you're flossing enough? Because for the longest time, that's pretty much all we heard. But the real story, whoa, it is so much more complex, and it connects to your entire body in ways that are going to surprise you.
Okay, but let's start with a number, 51%. What's that? Well, that's the percentage of American adults who have a systemic disorder. We're talking diabetes, heart disease, you name it, that directly changes their risk for oral disease. I mean, just let that sink in. That's more than 1 out of every 2 people.
In this slide right here, this gets to the absolute core of what we're talking about today. You know, we tend to think of our bodies in separate parts, right? But it's not. It is one big, interconnected system. What's happening in your immune system, for example, absolutely affects the health of your mouth. And maybe even more importantly, the other way around.
To really wrap our heads around this, we are going to zoom in on one super powerful case study, the link between diabetes and periodontal disease. It is just one of the clearest, most well-documented examples of how a condition in the body can completely change the game inside your mouth.
So, the first key idea we need to get is this thing called a hyperinflammatory response. Think of your immune system like your body's own personal security team. Now, normally, it handles bacterial threats pretty well. But in someone with, say, poorly controlled diabetes, that security team, it just completely overreacts. It goes into total overdrive. And all that extra inflammation causes a ton of collateral damage to your healthy gum tissue.
Now, let's meet the villains that are actually fueling this whole overreaction. They're called advanced glycation end products, or just AGs. When you have too much sugar in your blood, it literally starts sticking to proteins, and that's what creates these nasty little molecules. The best way to picture it? Think about making caramel. Sugar gets sticky, it gets stiff, it gums up the works. That is exactly what AGs do to our tissues, making them rigid and really messing with their ability to heal.
But here's the kicker. These AGs don't just float around causing trouble on their own. Nope, they need to lock onto a specific receptor, which, kind of perfectly, is called RAGE. So when an AG molecule snaps into a RAGE receptor on a cell, it's like turning a key in the ignition. It fires off this signal that starts a whole destructive chain reaction, basically screaming at the cell to ramp up inflammation right now.
Okay, this diagram here, this is where all those pieces really click together. So up at the top, you've got your normal everyday bacteria you'd find in plaque. But in a person with uncontrolled diabetes, you add in that AG-RH interaction we just talked about. And bam! That leads to 2 huge problems right in the middle. First, a way bigger and longer-lasting inflammatory response, and second, the body's repair systems basically get told to take a break. So the fire department is out of control, and the repair crew has been sent home.
So what you end up with is this awful self-perpetuating cycle. The inflammation damages the tissue, the body can't fix that damage properly, and that just leads to more breakdown, which causes, you guessed it, more inflammation. It's a feedback loop from hell that just chews through the gums and bone that hold your teeth in place.
And right here, this is what that internal chaos actually looks like in the real world. On the left, you see that severe, swollen, really angry-looking inflammation that's so common with poorly controlled diabetes. Now just compare that to the much milder situation on the right. That huge difference? That's the visual proof of that hyperinflammatory response we've been talking about. But look, this isn't just a diabetes story.
The same fundamental principle, where a condition in your body changes how your mouth responds to bacteria, that idea ripples out into other areas, especially when we start talking about things like stress and hormones.
Let's talk about stress for a sec. A quick burst of stress, that fight or flight thing, can actually give your immune system a little boost. But the real enemy here is chronic, long-term stress. That leads to constantly high levels of the hormone cortisol. Think of cortisol as the body's emergency brake for inflammation. But when it's always being pressed down, it's telling your body's defenses to just stand down permanently. And that leaves your gums totally vulnerable.
And then, of course, you have hormones. Big shifts like puberty, pregnancy, and menopause, they don't cause gum disease on their own, but they can act like a massive amplifier. It's like someone grabbed the volume knob on your body's inflammatory response and just cranked it all the way to 11. I mean, during pregnancy, even a tiny bit of plaque can set off this huge inflammatory reaction. So take a look at this flowchart. Does it look familiar? It should. It's basically the same destructive pattern we just saw with diabetes. During menopause, you get a drop in estrogen, you combine that with some plaque, and that triggers the same inflammatory cascade. This leads to more of these things called cytokines, which are basically alarm molecules that tell your body, hey, let's break down some bone. The end result? Exactly the same: tissue destruction and bone loss.
Okay, so after all of that science, what's the bottom line? What does all of this actually mean for you? Because understanding the connection is one thing, but actually bridging that gap between your oral health and your overall health, well, that takes some action.
So here's your game plan. It's pretty simple. First, just see the connection. Start thinking of your oral health not as this separate chore, but as a real window into your body's overall health. Second, share your full history with your dentist. They need to know about your diabetes, your stress, whatever, not just the meds you're on. Third, get your care team in sync. Encourage your doctor and your dentist to actually talk to each other. And finally, number 4, be vigilant at home. When you know your body is a bit more vulnerable, that meticulous self-care is, without a doubt, your absolute best defense. So we'll leave you with this one thought. Your mouth is telling a story about your overall health. It's a direct peek into what's happening inside your body. So the next time you're sitting in that dentist chair, just ask yourself, what story is my mouth telling about me right now?
All right, so when you think about gum disease, what comes to mind? Brushing, flossing, fighting off all those nasty bacteria, right? Well, what if I told you that's only half the story? And get this, the real culprit, the one doing most of the damage, might actually be you. Yeah, let's get into it. So to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with a puzzle. It's a real head-scratcher that's had scientists talking for a long, long time. Okay, picture this. You've got two people. They eat the same stuff, have the same habits, and if you were to check out the plaque on their teeth, it's identical, like down to the same amount of biofilm. But here's the crazy part. One of them has totally healthy gums, while the other is battling some serious gum disease. How is that even possible? You know, for years, we've all been told the same thing. The bacteria in that plaque, they're the bad guys. They're the ones attacking your gums, causing all that inflammation and bleeding and just wrecking the place. And I mean, it makes sense on the surface, doesn't it? But it just doesn't solve our puzzle. If it was only the bacteria, then our two people should have the exact same outcome, but they don't. So that means there's another player in this game, something much bigger. And that something bigger? Well, it's your own body. Yeah. The real story here isn't so much about the bacterial invasion itself. It's about how your body responds to that invasion. It's a fascinating thing called the host response. Okay, so you have to understand what your immune system's #1 job is. It's not there to save your teeth. Its prime directive, its main mission, is to protect your life from infection at all costs. Preserving your gums and teeth, that's way, way down on its priority list. This quote right here just nails it. It says it's not the bacteria that caused the destruction. It's the body's response to the bacteria. Let that sink in. The bacteria aren't the wrecking ball. They just sound the alarm. Your body is the one that swings it. And that's really the whole issue. Think about it. Your immune system spots some bacterial trespassers on the property line, your gums. Now, it could send a couple of security guards to escort them off. But instead, in some people, it panics and calls in a full-on military airstrike. The trespassers are gone for sure, but so is the house, the fence, the entire neighborhood. The collateral damage is just immense. So what are the bombs being dropped in this airstrike? They're actually these incredibly powerful little molecules called biochemical mediators.
Your own immune cells launch them. Let's meet the three main culprits here.
First, you've got cytokines. These are like the battlefield messengers, yelling, "We need more troops over here," which is great, to a point. But when they start yelling too much, things get chaotic, and they accidentally start ordering the destruction of friendly territory, your own tissue and bone.
Then there are the prostaglandins. These guys are the heavy-duty demolition crew. They show up and activate these cells that are literally called bone breakers, osteoclasts, and their whole job is just to tear down bone. So when you see major bone loss in gum disease, these prostaglandins are almost always the ones who gave the order. And last but not least, we have MMPs. Now, normally these guys are like a precise renovation crew. They carefully take down old bits of collagen to make way for new, healthy tissue. But when gum disease kicks in, all the rules go out the window. They become a totally unsupervised wrecking crew, just tearing down all the collagen that holds your gums together. It's a total free-for-all.
Okay, so we've met the players. How does this all actually go down inside your mouth? Well, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a progression, moving from a tiny little skirmish to a full-blown war. And it happens in 4 key stages.
It all kicks off with what's called the initial lesion. So bacteria start to set up camp. Your body notices and sends in the first wave of defenders, these immune cells called PMNs. But here's the thing, you can't see any of this. From the outside, your gums look totally healthy. The battle is completely invisible at this point.
Okay, now we're at stage 2, early gingivitis. The bacteria are still building up, so the body sends in the bigger guns. More immune cells flood the area, and they start releasing those destructive biochemicals we talked about. Now, for the first time, you actually see the effects. A little redness, some swelling. This is probably when you'd notice a little bit of pink on your toothbrush and wonder, what's up? By stage 3, we're at established gingivitis. The plaque has now crept down below the gum line, where it's way harder to get to. Your body's response goes into hyperdrive. It's just pumping out those cytokines, prostaglandins, and MMPs. The chemical warfare is in full swing, and now the signs, the redness, the swelling, are impossible to miss. And that brings us to stage 4, periodontitis. At this point, the immune response isn't temporary anymore. It's chronic. It's just a constant, grinding war. And all that friendly fire is doing some serious permanent damage. It's literally dissolving the bone and connective tissues that anchor your teeth. This is what creates those deep pockets, and, if left unchecked, is why teeth become loose and can eventually be lost.
So, this brings us full circle, right back to our original mystery. Why does one person hang out in the early stages, while another person's body goes all the way to stage 4 destruction? Well, it all comes down to balance.
This diagram shows it perfectly. It's like a fork in the road. In a healthy response, bacteria show up, there's a quick burst of inflammation, and then the body sends out signals to cool things down. Everything goes back to normal. But if for some reason that cool down signal doesn't work, the inflammation just keeps going. It becomes chronic. And that is the path to destruction.
So what decides which path your body takes? What tilts the scale? It's these other factors. This is the difference between our two people from the beginning. Some of it is just genetics. Some people's immune systems are just, a bit more trigger happy. Then you have things like smoking, which basically ties your body's healing hands behind its back. And then you conditions like diabetes, which can just pour gasoline on that inflammatory fire.
And that's why this final quote is so key. Plaque is necessary. You gotta have it to start the fire, but it's not sufficient. It's not enough on its own to burn the house down. The thing that really decides what happens next is your unique, individual immune response. And that's all tangled up with your genetics, your habits, and your total body health. So what does this all mean for you? It means that oral health is so much more than just brushing and flossing. It's this delicate dance, this really unique balance between the bacteria in your mouth and how your body decides to deal with them. Which leaves us with one last question to think about. What factors in your life might be tilting your own scale, one way or the other?
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to take a trip, a microscopic journey right into your own mouth to really understand what plaque is. And let me tell you, it's way more than just a little bit of leftover lunch. It's a living, highly organized world. So, let's get right into it. You know that feeling, right? That fuzzy film on your teeth when you first wake up. We've all been there. And the answer to what it is? Well, it's a lot more fascinating than you might think. That feeling is literally the foundation of a brand new city being built. So, what you're seeing here, that's a biofilm. And it's not just plaque. No, think
bigger. Think a living, breathing city constructed by millions of bacteria, and they're building it right on your teeth. Okay, so what is a biofilm really? The key thing to get is that these bacteria aren't just floating around by themselves. They're actually social. They team up, they build this fortress. It's this slimy, protective goop they make themselves, and it shields them from pretty much everything. And hey, this isn't just happening in your mouth. Not by a long shot. I mean, look at this. Biofilms are everywhere. On rocks in a stream, the inside of a water pipe, even on medical implants. It's basically one of nature's most successful survival strategies for bacteria. Now get ready for this number, because it's kind of mind-blowing. Your body has 10 times more bacterial cells than human cells. Yeah, you heard that right. 10 to 1. In a very real sense, we're more microbe than human. And you know what? Most of the time, that's a good thing. They're our partners. So how does this all happen? How does this microbial city go from, an empty lot to a full-blown metropolis? Well, it's not random at all. It's actually a super deliberate 5-stage construction project. It's like watching a city being built in fast forward. First, you get the pioneers, right? The first few microbes land on this thin film on your teeth. Then, they lock themselves down and start sending out invitations to their friends. Before you know it, they're building that slime shield, forming these crazy mushroom-shaped towers, and even sending out settlers to go start new colonies somewhere else in your mouth. It's incredible.
And the craziest part? The speed. This isn't a project that takes years. We're talking minutes for the first bacteria to show up. A couple of hours, and they're already setting up shop. And in just 2 to 4 days, boom, you've got a fully mature, highly resistant fortress up and running.
Okay, so now that the city is built, let's talk about its defenses. This isn't just a wall. This is a high-tech fortress of slime, and it makes the bacteria inside incredibly tough to get rid of. The biofilm has this amazing 3-pronged defense strategy. First, there's the slime shield itself. It literally blocks things from getting in. Then you've got teamwork. Different types of bacteria actually protect each other. Some can even pump out enzymes that neutralize antibiotics for the whole neighborhood. And finally, if all else fails, they have a secret weapon. They can play dead. This whole hibernation thing is just genius. The bacteria deep inside the biofilm can just go dormant. They go to sleep. And here's the kicker. Antibiotics only work on bacteria that are active and dividing. So these sleeping cells, totally immune. The antibiotic attack ends, and they just wake up and start rebuilding the city all over again. It's wild. So what's the bottom line here? The result of all these defenses is just staggering. Get this, it can take up to 1,500 times more antibiotics to kill a bacterium inside a biofilm than one that's just free-floating. 1,500 times. That's how effective this fortress is. Okay, so for the most part, this city of bacteria can actually live in harmony with us. It's a state called symbiosis. But what happens when that balance gets thrown off? When harmony turns into havoc? Think of the biofilm city as having 2 main types of citizens. On one side, you have the gram-positive bacteria. You can think of them as the good neighbors. They're usually associated with a healthy mouth. Then you have the gram-negative bacteria. These are the troublemakers. And the key difference, as you can see here, is their armor. That double membrane on the gram-negative bacteria, the troublemakers, it's loaded with these things called endotoxins. And when your body sees those toxins, it freaks out and launches a massive inflammatory response. And that response? That's gum disease. So when you just let this biofilm city grow and grow without disturbing it, you get this imbalance. It's called dysbiosis. The bad guys, the gram-negative bacteria, start to take over. And this hostile takeover is exactly what causes gingivitis and eventually much more serious periodontal disease. Okay, so we've established we're up against this nearly indestructible fortress. It's shielded, it's cooperative, it can even play dead to survive an antibiotic assault. It sounds invincible, right? So how on earth are we supposed to defeat it? You know, for all of its incredible biological complexity, for all these clever defense mechanisms, its biggest weakness is actually shockingly simple. It's not some fancy new drug or a magic bullet. It's just this, physical force. And that's the whole point. Brushing and flossing, that's not just cleaning, it's demolition. You are literally taking a wrecking ball to that bacterial city every single day. You're tearing down the walls, ripping apart that slime shield, and sending the inhabitants running. It forces them to start their entire construction project over from square one.
And this explains why things like mouthwash are helpful, but they can't do the heavy lifting on their own. Antimicrobials work best after you've already smashed down the gates with your toothbrush and floss. You have to break down the walls first to let them in. So the big takeaway here is that your daily routine is way more epic than you probably realized. You're not just cleaning your teeth. You're demolishing a fortress. Your toothbrush, that's your weapon. So every time you brush and floss, remember, you are winning a microscopic war. Now, are you ready for battle? Hey everyone, and welcome. So today we're talking about something that affects a ton of people, gum disease. And for years, we've all been told it's this straightforward battle, right? Us versus the bacteria, the plaque, the tartar. But what if the real enemy, the one causing most of the destruction, isn't the bacteria at all? Let's get into it. Just let that sink in for a second. What if the most powerful, destructive force tearing down the support for your teeth is actually your own immune system just trying to do its job? It's a wild idea, and it completely flips the script on how we need to treat this. All right, let's peel back the curtain on this. In this first part, we're going to uncover the hidden story of periodontitis and how our body's own defenses can accidentally become the bad guy. Okay, so at the very center of this story is a concept you gotta understand. It's called the host response. Basically, this is your body's alarm system. When it sees an invader, like all that bacteria in plaque, it sounds the alarms and sends out the troops. It's a totally brilliant and natural system that's designed to keep you safe. And you can almost picture it, right? The body sends in its specialized forces, these immune cells, and they just swarm the site of the infection. Their whole job is to take out the threat and clean up the mess. And in the beginning, this is exactly what you want to happen. But here is where the plot thickens. With a chronic problem like periodontitis, the bacteria are always there. So that defense system, it never gets the memo to shut down. It gets stuck in the on position, and your gums become this perpetual low-grade war zone. And you know, an army that's always fighting eventually gets sloppy. The body starts pumping out what we can basically call destruction signals. These are pro-inflammatory chemicals like prostaglandins and interleukins. But the real kicker is an enzyme called collagenase. Its job is to break down collagen, and it literally starts eating the support structures that hold your teeth in place. The protectors have turned into the wrecking crew. So, if the body's own response is the problem, what on earth is the solution? Well, instead of just carpet bombing all the bacteria with antibiotics, a much smarter strategy has come along. What if we could just hack the host response itself? And this brings us to host modulation therapy. The goal here is just so clever. It's not about killing bacteria anymore. It's about changing or modulating how the body is reacting. We're shifting the focus from the invader to our own over-the-top self-destructive reaction. The whole point is to just calm things down. You know, it's like a general telling his troops to cool it with the friendly fire. We're not getting rid of the army. We need it. We're just giving it new orders to be more precise and stop blowing up our own city. So how do we actually do this? Well, right now, there's only one FDA-approved host modulation therapy out there for periodontitis, and it uses a really common antibiotic, but with this bizarre counterintuitive twist that proves sometimes less is way, way more. Okay, get this, because this is the aha moment. We all know the antibiotic doxycycline, right? It's usually given in 50 or 100 milligram doses specifically to kill bacteria. But for host modulation, the dose is just 20 milligrams. At the super low sub-antibacterial dose, it doesn't kill bacteria at all. Its job is completely different. It just calms down that destructive host response. And this is it. This is the pill. It's often sold under the brand name PERIO218. A patient takes it twice a day, and its entire mission is to fine-tune the body's internal chemistry, not to be an antibiotic. So how does it work? Well, remember that destruction signal we talked about, that enzyme, collagenase? This tiny dose of doxycycline specifically targets and blocks that enzyme by shutting down the very thing that's eating away at your gums and bone. Studies have shown it can actually lead to shallower pockets and help you regain some of that precious attachment. It's a surgical strike against the body's own demolition team. Okay, so if low-dose doxycycline works, you're probably thinking, what about other common anti-inflammatory drugs? And that's a great question. Researchers have looked at a bunch of other options, but it turns out their potential is usually sunk by their problems. Let's find out why.
The first logical stop is, of course, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or NSAIDs. You've got these in your cabinet. We're talking ibuprofen, naproxen. They reduce inflammation. Seems like a match made in heaven, right? And, early studies looked pretty promising. Taking NSAIDs every day for 3 years actually slowed down the rate of bone loss. But the keywords there are long-term use. And that's where the wheels fall off. The side effects are just too much of a risk for this kind of treatment. We're talking serious stomach problems, a higher risk of bleeding, and even damage to your kidneys or liver. Because of that, not a single NSAID is approved to treat periodontal disease. The risks just flat out outweigh the rewards. All right, so if NSAIDs are out, what's next? Well, researchers looked at another class of drugs, bisphosphonates. These are the drugs used to treat osteoporosis because they stop the cells that break down bone. I mean, since bone loss is the name of the game in periodontitis, this seems like a perfect fit.
And yeah, on paper, this looks like a slam dunk. These drugs go right to the source and mess with the whole process of bone resorption. Theoretically, it could stop the disease cold.
But there's a huge catch, and I should give you a heads up. The image we're about to look at is pretty jarring. While it's rare, bisphosphonates come with this devastating potential side effect called osteonecrosis of the jaw, where the jawbone itself can literally die and become exposed. It's a risk that makes these drugs a complete non-starter for treating gum disease.
So after all that, what have we learned? Now that we know what host modulation is and what it isn't, where does it actually fit into a real-world treatment plan? It's so important to see it not as a cure-all, but as one very specific tool in the toolbox. When you look at the whole shebang, all the options for treating periodontitis, you can see host modulation therapy is just one case of a much larger puzzle. It has to work together with educating the patient, getting cleanings to reduce bacteria, managing other health risks, and yes, sometimes even surgery.
And this, right here, is the biggest takeaway of the day. Host modulation therapy is an adjunct. That means it adds to, it supports, it does not replace the basics of good periodontal care. You still absolutely need to get professional cleanings and be a superstar with your home care. This therapy just helps your body react to all that good work in a healthier, less destructive way. This whole idea of modulating the body's response instead of just attacking a bug, it's a really profound shift in medicine. It's working in the world of gum disease, but it really leaves you with a much bigger question. For all the other chronic inflammatory diseases out there, from arthritis to digestive disorders, where else could this exact same approach completely change the game? Thanks so much for watching. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a battleground you probably don't think about much. I'm talking about the microscopic war against gum disease happening right now inside your own mouth. Yeah, it's this constant, ongoing fight. On one side, you've got your body's own defenses, plus your daily brushing and flossing. But on the other side, you've got these literal armies of invading bacteria just trying to set up camp and take over your gums.
Okay, but what happens when the bad guys really dig in? I mean, they're building these fortresses that your standard tools, your toothbrush, your floss, just can't break through. So that's the big question, right? How do you fight an enemy you can't even get to?
All right, to really get a grip on this, we've got to know who we're up against. And listen, we're not just talking about a few free-floating germs here. No, we're up against this highly organized, armored fortress. It's called a biofilm. So picture this biofilm like an enemy city. All the bacteria are living together in this tight-knit community, and they've built this gooey slime layer all around themselves. It's basically a force field, making it super, super hard for your body's defenses, or really any chemical agent, to bust through and take them out. And you know what? Like any smart army, these bacteria have bunkers they can run to. They retreat into what we call microbial reservoirs. We're talking about nooks and crannies like furcation areas, that's where the tooth roots split, or hiding out on tiny bits of calculus your brush can't get to. They even burrow deep inside your gum tissue and into the tooth's tiny little dentinal tubules. And from these safe houses, they can just wait out a cleaning and then come right back to repopulate the whole area. The battle just starts all over again. So because these enemies are so well fortified, so dug in, sometimes mechanical cleaning, when your hygienist does scaling and root planing, it just isn't enough. It needs backup. And this is where we call in the chemical reinforcements as an adjunct to the main therapy. Now, for any of these chemical weapons to actually work, they have to follow 3 basic rules of engagement. Rule 1, it absolutely has to reach the enemy's stronghold. Rule 2, it's got to show up with enough firepower. That means a concentration that's either bacteriostatic, which stops the bacteria from reproducing, or bactericidal, which just flat out kills them. And rule 3, and this is crucial, it has to stay there long enough to actually win the fight.
Okay, so one way to go on the offensive is with just overwhelming widespread force. You can think of it as a systemic airstrike, hitting the entire body to get at that infection that's buried deep in the gums. This whole strategy involves systemic delivery. So instead of putting something right on the spot, the patient just takes a pill or a capsule. The agent then travels all through the bloodstream to get to the infection from the inside. And the most common form of this is, of course, antibiotics. They're a really powerful tool in this fight, but they're also a very blunt instrument. But wait a minute. If they're so powerful, why aren't we using them for every single patient? Why is their routine use actually, not recommended? Well, the number one reason is the risk of some serious collateral damage. Using antibiotics too much can lead to antibiotic resistance. This is where the enemy bacteria literally evolved to survive the attack, which could make our best weapons totally useless for future, even more serious infections. It's a huge problem. So if that systemic airstrike has such a massive drawback, what's the other option? Well, instead of that big widespread attack, what if we could just send in a small team of special forces for a targeted precision strike right where we need them most? And that is the whole idea behind controlled release delivery. You take an antibacterial agent and place it directly into the infected gum pocket. The material it's in then just dissolves slowly, releasing the medicine over days right on top of that enemy biofilm. Let's meet a few of these special forces teams. First, you've got Atridox. This stuff is pretty cool. It's a gel with the antibiotic doxycycline. The dentist applies it as a liquid right into the gum pocket, where it turns solid. It basically creates this little reservoir that slowly releases the drug for about a week. Then there's Aristin. This one has a totally different approach. It uses these tiny powder-like microspheres of another antibiotic, minocycline. These little spheres stick to the inside of the pocket, and they're bioresorbable, which is just a fancy way of saying they dissolve on their own over time, dropping their payload right on the target. And we also have the PERIO chip. This is a tiny little gelatin chip that's packed with chlorhexidine, which is a really powerful antiseptic. It's designed to be placed in deeper pockets, and it delivers its agent without using an antibiotic at all. And that means zero risk of contributing to antibiotic resistance. Okay, so we've got two very different strategies, the widespread systemic airstrike and the targeted local special forces. With these options on the table, how in the world do we know which weapon is the right one for the job? Well, let's just look at the scorecard. This table lines up the different strategies against our 3 rules of engagement. Does it get to the site? Is the concentration high enough? And does it stick around long enough to actually work? The results here, they're pretty clear. As you can see, things like mouth rinses and irrigation, they fail because the agent gets washed away almost instantly. It just can't stay on target. And our systemic airstrike, well, it gets a good for reaching the site, but only fair for concentration and time. And that's not even counting the risk of resistance. And that leaves our special forces, the controlled release delivery. It's the only method that gets a good across all 3 critical criteria. It delivers the right concentration to the right place and keeps it there long enough to be truly effective. A perfect 3 for 3. But, and this might be the most important takeaway of all, even the absolute best weapon is not a magic bullet. There is no chemical agent out there that can cure periodontitis all by itself. All of these things are adjuncts. They are support troops for the main event, which is and always will be professional, mechanical cleaning by your dental team. At the end of the day, fighting gum disease needs a full-on, comprehensive strategy that's tailored just for you. It's all about combining that mechanical disruption with the right chemical backup. So, the question I want to leave you with is this. On the battlefield of your mouth, is your dental team deploying the right strategy to win the war?
So today we're going to talk about something that could seriously change up your oral hygiene game. The water flosser. We're going to dig into the science, look at the real data, and see if it actually lives up to all the hype. Let's get right into it.
All right, so let me just start with a question for you. You brush, you floss, you think you've got it all covered, right? But what if I told you there's a good chance you're not getting your teeth and gums truly clean? Yeah, that answer might just surprise you. So for this first part, we're going to go beyond the toothbrush. We're going to look at why our standard tools have their limits and uncover this invisible challenge that's, well, it's living in all of our mouths.
You know, the thing we're really fighting in our mouths isn't just that piece of spinach from lunch. It's this sticky, complex colony of bacteria called biofilm. You probably know it by its other name, plaque. And the problem is, it's incredibly stubborn, and just brushing and flossing doesn't always get rid of it completely, especially in those really hard-to-reach spots.
And when that biofilm just sits there, our body, well, it doesn't like it, and it fights back with inflammation. That's what you see as red, swollen, or even bleeding gums. So the real goal, the whole point of cleaning our teeth, is to break up that biofilm before our body has to react like that.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? How do we get better at this? Let's dive into our next section and meet the tech that was designed to tackle this very problem head-on.
All right, so this is it, the water flosser. You might have also heard it called a dental water irrigator. And it doesn't matter if it's a big one for your countertop or a smaller portable one. The idea is the same. It shoots a powerful pulsating stream of water to clean where your toothbrush and even your floss really struggle to get to.
But wait, it's not just about spraying water in your mouth. There's some really cool science going on here that makes this thing work so well. Let's talk about its hydrokinetic secret. See, it's not a steady stream. The secret is the pulsation. It creates these tiny, rapid waves of pressure, compression and decompression that literally knock that stubborn biofilm right off the tooth surface. You can kind of think of it like a super precise, gentle power washer for your gum line.
And that action creates two different cleaning zones at the same time. First, you've got the impact zone. That's where the water first hits and starts to break up the plaque. But then, and this is the really cool part, you get the flushing zone. That's where the water goes deeper, below the gum line, and flushes out all the gunk that the impact zone just loosened up.
Okay, theory is great, but how does it actually stack up against the old standby, regular dental floss? It's time for a little showdown. Let's look at the data.
This is really what it all comes down to, right? The most dangerous stuff is the plaque we can't even see, hiding out below the gum line. So the big question is, how deep can our tools actually get?
And wow, the numbers here really tell the story. Just look at this. Your toothbrush, or just swishing with mouthwash, you're getting maybe 1 to 2 millimeters deep. Okay, traditional floss, that's better. It gets you down to about 3 millimeters. But the water flosser, we're talking 5 to 6 millimeters, sometimes even more. That is a huge difference. It's reaching almost twice as deep as floss, getting way down into that critical pocket space.
So, with results like that, you're probably wondering, okay, is this thing for me? Let's break down who really stands to benefit from this technology.
Well, the science is pretty clear. When people use these regularly, you see a huge drop in that nasty biofilm. And what follows that? Less bleeding, less inflammation. It even cuts down on the specific bad bacteria that cause gum disease and helps calm your body's own over-the-top destructive response.
So who really needs one?
Well, anyone who's in periodontal maintenance, for sure. Or, let's be real, anyone who hates flossing or just doesn't do it. But it's an absolute game changer if you have implants, braces, crowns, or bridge work. And it's also highly recommended for patients with diabetes who really need to be on top of their oral health. I mean, just think about it. Have you ever tried to get floss around all that metal from braces or properly clean around an implant? It's a nightmare. The water flosser just flushes those impossible to reach spots out with no problem. It makes things so much easier.
Okay, we've talked a lot about what you can do at home. But what about when you go to the dentist? Some offices do what's called professional irrigation. Let's do a quick reality check on that to get the full picture.
This is super interesting. A major review of a ton of research found that getting that professional irrigation during a deep cleaning, well, it didn't really add any extra benefit. So why not? The answer comes down to a word you probably haven't heard before: substantivity. It basically just means the ability of a cleaning agent to stick around and keep working for a while. And the stuff they use in professional irrigation, it has almost zero substantivity. It cleans for a second and then, poof, the effect is gone almost immediately. So here's the big takeaway from all this, that professional cleaning is absolutely vital, right? It gets rid of the really hard stuff. But the real power, the thing that controls your long-term gum health, is what you do every single day. That consistent home care is what makes all the difference in the world.
And that really brings us back to you. Knowing that a tool exists that can clean nearly twice as deep as traditional floss, right there in your own bathroom, how might that change the way you approach your daily routine? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so let's talk about gum health. You're probably thinking about your toothbrush, some floss, and that regular cleaning you get a couple of times a year. But what if I told you that for a lot of people, that's not even scratching the surface of the real problem? Let's get into why.
Have you ever been brushing and noticed a little blood and thought, I'll just be more careful and my next cleaning will sort it out? Yeah, that's what most of us think. But when we're dealing with a deeper issue called periodontitis, that simple assumption can actually stand in the way of your gums ever getting truly healthy.
I mean, just look at this. Getting from that state of inflammation and disease to a place of stable, solid health, that's a huge transformation. And it takes a whole lot more than just a surface-level polish. It takes a real strategy, and, you guessed it, it takes a team.
So what do you do when the problem is buried way down deep, where a standard cleaning just can't reach? Well, we have to go beyond the basics. We have to get into a much more specialized game plan.
And that specialized plan is called non-surgical periodontal therapy, or NSPT. The best way to think about it is like a therapeutic deep clean. See, the goal isn't just to make your teeth shiny. The real mission is to get below the gum line, to wipe out the bacterial infection and the inflammation right at the source. That's what gives your gums a real chance to heal. Now, the first key player on this team is your dental hygienist, and they're not just cleaning your teeth. Nope. They are executing a very precise clinical playbook designed to get your oral health totally back on track. And here's their strategy broken down. It's actually a four-part plan. First, they've got to bring that bacterial load way down. Then they look for any local issues, like a rough filling, that give bacteria a place to hide. They also have to think about any systemic things, like diabetes, that could be a factor. And finally, the ultimate goal: stop the disease from progressing and lock in that connection between your gums and teeth. So, the bottom line is this. Your hygienist's job is to hit a giant reset button. They go in and create this perfectly clean, healthy environment below your gums, which gives your body the fighting chance it needs to start repairing itself. But their incredible work is only half the story.
Because now we have to talk about the most important player on this team, the one person who can make or break the entire thing. And that player is you. The success of this whole therapy depends on you stepping up into a brand new active role.
See, this isn't something that's just done to you anymore. It's something that is done with you. For this to work, it has to be a real partnership, a true collaboration, where you and your dental professional are fighting for the exact same goal. And we actually have a name for this role. You become a co-therapist. It means you're not just sitting on the sidelines anymore. You are an active, absolutely essential part of the team, helping to make decisions and, this is key, carrying out the daily game plan at home. So, what is your daily mission exactly? Well, job number one is controlling that bacterial film, plaque, every single day. This is what keeps all that hard work your hygienist did from being undone. It also means you're in on the conversation, helping to figure out the care plan that works best for you. All right, so if you're the co-therapist, you're going to need the right equipment, right? You need a good toolkit. Now we get to the really practical stuff, how you're actually going to accomplish that daily mission. Okay, let's just be real for a second. We've all been there. The hygienist leans in and asks that question. Are you flossing every day? And if you kind of hesitate or feel a little awkward, well, you are in very, very good company. Take a look at this number, 25%. Any guesses what that could be? It has everything to do with that exact question. You got it. More than a quarter of us admit that we aren't totally honest about our flossing habits. But hang on, because here comes a twist you probably didn't see coming. It turns out that for this specific problem, periodontitis, forcing yourself to use regular old floss might not even be the best thing to do. So all that guilt you might have felt, let's just set that aside for a minute and look at why. This slide shows it perfectly. See, in a healthy mouth, that little triangle of gum tissue, the papilla, it fills the space between your teeth nice and snug. Floss works great for that. But periodontitis actually destroys some of that tissue, leaving behind these open gaps. And trying to clean a wide curved space with a tiny piece of string, it's like trying to clean a bowl with a wire. It just doesn't work. So you need a different tool for the job. You need things like interdental brushes. They're like tiny little bottle brushes for your teeth, or special end tuft brushes for tough spots, or even a water flosser. These are all designed to get in there and clean those bigger, more complex spaces effectively. And this is the real takeaway. There's no single best way to do this. This is where your role as a co-therapist is absolutely critical.
It's about you and your hygienist working together to figure out which tools work for the unique shape of your mouth, and, just as importantly, which ones you'll actually use every day.
Look, this whole approach isn't about a quick fix. Not at all. This is about setting up a new, healthy normal that you can maintain for the long haul. This is about winning the long game and winning it together.
So, after all this work, what does healing actually look like way down at the microscopic level? Well, the goal is to form something called a long junctional epithelium. Okay, that's a mouthful, I know. So here's an awesome way to picture it. Think of your body creating a brand new, tight, healthy turtleneck collar right around your tooth. It's a seal that protects the root from any new bacteria trying to invade.
Which brings us right back to the main point of all of this. That healing, that new turtleneck collar, it's only possible because of the partnership. It's that professional reset combined with your daily maintenance at home. It really is a collaboration. So, if you've been fighting a losing battle with your gum health, maybe it's time to change how you see it. Stop thinking of it as a solo chore and start seeing it for what it is, a team sport. Your hygienist is the coach. They've got the playbook. But you're on the field every single day. You're the star player. The only question is, are you ready to be the MVP?
Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most common, but maybe least understood parts of a dental visit, the periodontal assessment. We're going to decode what is really going on when your hygienist starts checking out your gums. You know the moment. You're sitting in the chair, you hear someone call out 323, ooh, a 4, and you're just thinking, is that good? Is that bad? What does that even mean? Well, you're in the right place, because by the end of this, you'll know exactly what those numbers mean, and a whole lot more. Okay, let's get into it. So here is how we're going to break it down. We're basically going to follow the same path your hygienist does. We'll start with the first look, that quick initial screening. Then we'll go on the deep dive to see what a full-on investigation looks like. After that, we'll start decoding the clues they find. And finally, we'll see how it all comes together to create your blueprint for long-term health. All right, first things first. You should know that not all gum checkups are created equal. It all starts with a screening, which is basically a rapid check to see if there are any red flags that mean we need to take a closer look. So what's the difference here? Well, think of the periodontal screening, or PSR, on the left like a triage nurse in the ER. It's a super fast, really efficient way to sort things out. Are things generally healthy? Is there a little bit of inflammation? Or do we have something more serious that needs a specialist? That's when you move to the one on the right, the comprehensive assessment. That's the full workup. The whole screening process kicks off with this tool right here. It's called a periodontal probe. And you can think of it like a tiny, super precise ruler for that little space or pocket between your tooth and your gum. The hygienist just gently walks it around every tooth to get those all-important measurements. And those measurements are what you hear being called out as these simple codes, usually from 0 to 4. As a rule of thumb, lower numbers, that's great news. It points to healthy gums. But a higher number, say a 3 or a 4, well, that's a flag. It tells the clinician that there's inflammation and those pockets are getting deeper. It's basically the signal that it's time for that more comprehensive look. So, if that quick screening throws up a red flag, it's time to put on the detective hat and start gathering some more evidence. This is where we officially move from a simple check to a full-blown investigation. And that brings us to the main event, the comprehensive periodontal assessment. We're going way beyond just measuring pockets now. The goal here is to create a complete 360-degree view of what's happening with your gums and the bone underneath. And this is where the real detective work begins. They're looking for a whole range of clues. For example, bleeding on probing is a dead giveaway for active inflammation. Tooth mobility, that tells them if the bone that supports your teeth is getting weaker. And calculus, which is just hardened plaque, that stuff is like a fortress for bad bacteria. Every single one of these clues is a vital piece of the puzzle. Okay, that's a lot of stuff to keep track of, right? So let's just zoom in on two of the most common and honestly most visible clues that clinicians are looking for: gingival recession and tooth mobility. First step is gingival recession. All this means is that your gum line has started to pull away from the tooth, which leaves the root exposed. Now, this is a big deal because the root surface isn't protected by that super tough enamel, so it's way more vulnerable to things like decay and sensitivity. And it can happen for a bunch of reasons, not just hygiene. Now, to really understand how serious it is, clinicians actually classify it. It all starts here with Class 1. You can see the gum has pulled back a bit, but it hasn't crossed a key boundary line in the tissue just yet. Then you get to Class 2. See how that recession has now reached or even gone past that important tissue boundary? This signals a more significant problem. By the time you get to class 3, things are getting more complex. It's not just about the gum line anymore. The gum tissue between the teeth is actually starting to disappear. And finally, we have the most severe stage, class 4. Here, you've got major loss of not just the gum tissue all around, but the underlying bone too. Okay, so that's where the gums are sitting. But the next huge clue is how secure the teeth are. You know, healthy teeth, they really don't move. But as periodontal disease starts to damage the bone that holds them in, they can start to get loose. And you guessed it, this gets classified too. Class 1 and 2, that's just increasing amounts of side-to-side movement. But class 3, now that's the major red flag. It's not just about a lot of horizontal movement, it's the vertical movement that's really critical. A tooth that can move up and down in its socket means there's been a severe loss of the bone that's supposed to anchor it. So why do some people seem to struggle more with this stuff than others, even with great hygiene? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is genetics. This number, 30%, is the estimated slice of the population that is genetically wired to have a supercharged inflammatory response to plaque. Their immune system just overreacts, and that can lead to way more damage. So you might be thinking, okay, why all this data collection? Why measure every single millimeter? It's because your clinician is doing something incredibly important. They're building a personalized blueprint of your oral health. This quote from our source material absolutely hits the nail on the head. Every single measurement, every little observation, it all becomes your unique baseline data. Think of it as the starting point, a detailed map of your gum health at one specific moment in time. And that baseline turns your chart from just a boring record into the actual story of your health. By comparing every future visit back to this initial blueprint, your clinician can spot tiny changes over the years. They can see if a treatment is working, or if a new problem is just starting to pop up, often long before you'd ever feel a thing. It lets them be proactive, not just reactive. So the next time you're in that chair and you hear those numbers being called out, you won't be in the dark anymore. You'll be an informed, active partner in your own healthcare. Which kind of leaves us with one final thought. Knowing what you know now, what questions will you ask at your next dental visit?
All right, so when you think about gum disease, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably bacteria, right? Plaque attacking your body. But what if I told you that's only half the story? Today, we're going to dive into the pretty shocking science of how our own defense system is actually the real villain behind all the damage.
So let's just sit with that question for a second. What if the very system that evolved to protect you, your immune system, was actually the lead architect in one of the most common diseases on the entire planet? It sounds completely backward, I know, but this idea is at the very core of how we understand and treat gum disease today.
And look, this isn't just some wild new theory. It's a foundational truth in medicine. It all boils down to this single powerful idea. It is the body's response to the bacteria, not the bacteria itself, that causes the real destruction. Think of it like this. The bacteria, they just ring the doorbell. It's your body that decides to answer the door with a bazooka.
Okay, so to understand how this whole thing goes so completely off the rails, we first have to appreciate what it looks like when it's working perfectly. Let's take a look at the body's initial, healthy, and frankly, life-saving response when it first detects a threat. So here's the setup, the initial battlefield. On one side, you have the invader, this community of bacteria we call plaque biofilm. And on the other side, you've got your body's first responders. They launch a process called acute inflammation. Now, this is the good kind of inflammation. It's supposed to be fast, it's targeted, and it's there to protect you.
The goals of this initial attack are really simple and super effective. Get in there, wipe out the harmful bacteria, clean up any cells that got damaged in the fight, and prepare the area for repair. But, and this is absolutely the most important part, it's designed to shut itself down once the threat is neutralized. It's a special ops team, not an occupying army. So how does the body actually fight this war? Well, it doesn't use bullets, it uses biochemistry. It has a whole arsenal of powerful chemical weapons known as mediators of inflammation. These are the molecules that do all the heavy lifting, but as we're about to see, they're not exactly precise surgical tools.
First up, we have cytokines. The best way to think about these are as emergency flares. They are proteins that shoot up from the battlefield, basically screaming to the rest of the immune system, "Hey, we need backup over here, and we need it now." They are absolutely essential for calling in reinforcements.
Next in the arsenal are prostaglandins. Now, if cytokines are the flares, these are like the demolition order. Their job is to tell specialized cells called osteoclasts to start breaking down bone. You heard that right. This is the chemical that is literally giving the order to destroy the bone that holds your teeth in your jaw.
And finally, meet the ground troops, the wrecking crew. They're called matrix metalloproteases, or MMPs for short. Now, in a healthy body, these enzymes are just part of the maintenance team, helping remodel tissues. But when inflammation gets out of control, the body goes into overdrive, pumping out way too many of these, and they just start dissolving the collagen in connective tissue, the literal ropes holding your teeth in place.
So here's the critical question. What happens when that shutdown signal we talked about never comes? What if the immune system gets stuck in the on position? Well, that is the tipping point. That is the exact moment when helpful, protective inflammation turns into a harmful, destructive, chronic nightmare.
And this chart shows that fork in the road perfectly. See the path on the right? That's the healthy route. A bug shows up, inflammation kicks in, the problem gets solved, and the body returns to normal. But now look at the path on the left. That's the dark path. The inflammation is never resolved, it just smolders, becoming chronic, and leading directly to diseases like periodontitis, diabetes, and even cardiovascular disease. So to put it as simply as possible, in periodontitis, the all-clear signal never sounds. The body's chemical weapons, the cytokines, the prostaglandins, the MMPs, they just keep firing day after day. And pretty soon, the collateral damage to our own healthy tissues becomes the main event.
So let's actually watch how this friendly fire builds up stage by stage. We can literally see this process of self-destruction unfold in 4 distinct phases.
It all starts here in stage 1, the initial lesion. The very first soldiers of the immune system have shown up on the scene. And this is what's so wild, if you looked in a mirror, you wouldn't see a thing. Clinically, the tissue looks perfectly healthy. The war has started, but it's completely silent.
Moving into stage 2, the early lesion, the battle really starts to heat up. More immune cells are flooding the area, releasing more of those chemical mediators, and now the damage is starting to become visible. This is where you would see the first clinical signs of gingivitis, a little bit of redness, a little bit of swelling.
By stage 3, we've got an established lesion. The plaque has now pushed its way down below the gum line, and the body's response is in full swing. The production of cytokines, prostaglandins, and MMPs is way up, and this is causing significant breakdown of the connective tissue. The destruction is becoming much more serious. And that brings us to stage 4, the advanced lesion. This is not gingivitis anymore, this is full-blown periodontitis. The inflammation is now intensely chronic, and the body's immune response is just destroying everything in its path. The connective tissue, the ligaments, and, look closely at the image, the alveolar bone itself is now being eaten away.
Let's really focus on that bone loss, because it's the most devastating and permanent consequence of this disease. To get it, we need to understand the delicate balance of something called bone remodeling and how chronic inflammation just throws the whole system into chaos.
See, in a healthy state, your bone isn't just static. It's constantly being remodeled in this beautiful balanced cycle. You have cells called osteoclasts that break down old bone, that's resorption. And then you have cells called osteoblasts that come right in behind them and build new bone. Breakdown equals rebuilding, it's a perfect equilibrium.
This whole process is controlled by 2 key signals. The easiest way to think of it is like a car's accelerator and brake. Rank L is the accelerator. It's the signal that tells those osteoclasts to start breaking down bone, and OPG is the brake. It blocks rank L and stops the breakdown process. Health depends entirely on the balance between those 2.
So what do you think happens in periodontitis? The chronic inflammation just floods the area with signals that crank up the production of rank L. The accelerator for bone destruction gets slammed to the floor. At the same time, the brake, OPG, fails. And the result? Unchecked, continuous, relentless bone loss.
Which leaves us with a final, and honestly a pretty unsettling thought. We count on our immune system to be our greatest protector, our most loyal defender. But as we've seen, there's a profound danger lurking inside that very protection. So the real question is, what happens when our best friend forgets how to stand down?
Losing a tooth can feel, well, permanent. But what if it wasn't? What if you could get a second chance with something that's part medical device and part, honestly, a piece of bionic engineering? That's exactly the promise of a dental implant. So today, we're going to break down what they are,
how they work, and the one absolutely crucial thing you need to know to make them last a lifetime. Let's get right into it. Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start with what an implant really is, then we'll look at its bionic anatomy. After that, we'll dive into the incredible science of how it actually becomes one with your body. And this is where it gets really interesting. We'll compare it to a natural tooth. That's where it's all going to click. And finally, we'll cover the warning signs to look out for and, most importantly, how you can protect this amazing piece of technology. You know, this question really gets to the core of it. A dental implant isn't just about filling a space in your smile, right? It's about getting back the ability to eat whatever you want, the confidence to just laugh out loud without a second thought, and that feeling of being whole again. And for millions of people, this isn't some kind of science fiction. It's a second chance they are living with every single day. Just look at the difference here. This shows the massive leap in technology we're talking about. On the left, you've got the old-school removable partial denture. It clips onto your other teeth, which can put a lot of stress on them, and it often feels like, well, something that doesn't belong in your mouth. Now, look at the right. That's an implant-supported bridge. It's locked in place, totally independent of your other teeth, and it functions just like the real thing. It's the difference between a temporary patch and a truly permanent solution.
All right, so let's get down to the fundamentals. What exactly is this device we're talking about? The key words to really focus on here are non-biologic and surgically inserted. What does that actually mean? It means this isn't something your body grew. It's a high-tech, artificial device that's placed directly into your jawbone. It's not just sitting on top of your gums. It's designed to become a part of you. You can think of it as a permanent anchor for your brand new tooth.
You might think an implant is just one solid piece, but it's actually a super sophisticated three-part system. So let's take a look at the anatomy. Okay, this picture lays it all out perfectly. You've got the implant itself, that's the screw-looking part that goes right into the bone. Then you have the abutment, which is basically the connector piece. And then right on top, you have the crown. That's the part everyone sees, the part that looks and feels like a tooth. Every single part has a critical job to do. So an easy way to think about it is like this. The implant, that's your new root. The abutment, that's the connector. And the crown, well, that's the new tooth. Simple as that. Root, connector, tooth. It's a three-part system that completely replaces what you lost. Okay, now we get to the really cool part, the magic. How in the world does a piece of titanium become a permanent part of your jaw? It's not glue, and it's not just screwed in tight. It's this amazing biological process. Osseointegration. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but the idea behind it is just incredible. Osseo means bone, and integration, means to become one. Literally, your living bone cells grow right onto and into the surface of this implant, locking it in solid. It's not just in the bone, it becomes part of the bone. This image really shows it happening. So on the left, this is what it looks like after it's been placed. It's in there, it's stable, but you can kind of see that tiny space between the implant threads and your bone. This is ground zero. And now, look at the right. A few months later, boom, your bone has actively grown into all those little nooks and crannies on the implant surface. That gap is gone. The implant is now, for all intents and purposes, a part of your jaw. So how do you know if it all worked? Well, it boils down to this really simple checklist. A successful implant does not move. At all. Not even a tiny bit. The gums around it look healthy and calm, not red or puffy, and it doesn't hurt. You just chew on it and it works. That's it. All right, listen up, because this next part is probably the single most important thing to understand about dental implants. It looks like a tooth, it acts like a tooth, but it is missing one crucial little thing that your natural teeth have. And that one difference changes literally everything. And here it is, the periodontal ligament, or PDL for short. Your natural teeth, they aren't fused to your jaw. They're actually hanging in the socket by this tiny, amazing ligament. It's a shock absorber, it's packed with blood vessels to fight infection, and it gives you that feeling of pressure when you bite. An implant? It has none of that. It's fused solid to the bone. This is what makes it so incredibly strong, but it's also its Achilles heel. No shock absorber, a much weaker defense system against germs, and you can't really feel how hard you're biting down. This is the implant's greatest strength and its greatest weakness. So because of that huge difference, the missing PDL, when things start to go wrong with an implant, they can go wrong in a very unique way and often a whole lot faster. Let's look at the two big troublemakers. Right, so the crown on top is artificial, but your gums and your bone, they are 100% real. And bacteria, they don't care. They will attack the tissue around an implant just like they would a natural tooth. But here's the kicker. Because there's no PDL with that rich blood supply, your body's defense squad is weaker in that area. And that means when trouble starts, it can escalate much, much more quickly.
Okay, so there are two stages of trouble you need to know about. First is peri-implant mucositis. Think of this as gingivitis for an implant. The gums are red and inflamed, the bone is okay. This is your warning shots, and the good news is it's completely reversible. But if it's ignored, it can turn into peri-implantitis. And this is the real enemy. Now the infection is destroying the bone that holds the implant. And once that bone is gone, it's gone for good.
So what puts an implant at risk? Well, the list is pretty clear. If you've had gum disease before, you're more susceptible. Poor home care is a major factor. Smoking dramatically hinders healing and defense. And then there are two others: leftover cement from the crown, which can irritate the gums, and biomechanical overload, basically too much force on an implant that can't feel it and can't absorb it.
So how do you protect this incredible investment? The good news is, the most important factor for long-term success isn't your dentist or your surgeon, it's you. These are the red flags. The #1 sign of failure is any movement at all. A healthy implant is rock solid. Any wiggle, no matter how small, is a problem. Also, be on the lookout for bleeding, swelling, or a feeling of puffiness around the implant. If you notice any of these, call your dental office right away. And look, you're not in this alone. Your dental hygienist is your co-pilot in this journey. They have the special tools and training to clean around your implant safely and to measure the health of the surrounding tissues. Regular professional maintenance is non-negotiable for the long-term health of an implant. So, it all comes down to this. You have a piece of bionic engineering in your mouth that can last a lifetime. It's an incredible second chance. The only question is, are you giving it the care it needs to go the distance? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a silent battle that's happening inside the mouths of millions of people, maybe even yours. It's the journey from healthy gums to serious gum disease. And, it often goes completely unnoticed until it's pretty far along, so understanding this is absolutely crucial for your overall health.
Okay, let's just start with a number that should really make you sit up and listen. Almost half, 47% of adults over 30 are dealing with periodontitis. That's nearly 1 out of every 2 people. We're not talking about a minor issue here. This is a huge public health problem. In fact, it's the #1 reason adults end up losing their teeth.
So before we get into all the problems, we need a baseline, right? We need to know what we're actually aiming for. What does a truly healthy mouth look and feel like? Let's paint that picture first.
Now, check out this definition from the 2017 World Workshop. What I love about this is that health isn't just about not having a disease. It's about being able to function totally normally, to eat what you want, to smile without worrying, to avoid any physical or even mental baggage from gum problems. It's really about your total well-being. And here's what that looks like practically speaking. Healthy gums? They don't bleed when you brush or floss. Period. They have this nice, uniform pink color, not that angry red you sometimes see. They're firm, they're not swollen, and they create this perfect, tight seal right around the tooth. But here's the most critical part. There's absolutely no loss of bone or the little ligaments that hold your teeth in place. That right there, that's the goal. All right, let's move on to the first sign of trouble. Think of this stage as your body sending up a flare, a really clear warning signal. And the best part? At this point, you can still turn the ship around completely. Just look at the difference here. I mean, it's night and day. On the left, you've got that healthy, pink, firm tissue we just talked about. But on the right, well, that's a whole different story. The gums are red, they're puffy, they look swollen and irritated. That inflammation you're seeing, that's your body's alarm system going off in response to a buildup of dental plaque. So here's the key takeaway for this stage. Gingivitis is just inflammation caused by plaque. And this is the most important word. It is completely reversible. With some good home care and a professional cleaning, you can get right back to that perfect state of health we saw a minute ago. No permanent damage has been done, yet.
But it's not always quite so simple. Sometimes, other things going on in your body can pour gasoline on the fire, causing a huge, exaggerated reaction to even a tiny amount of plaque.
This is a wild example. What you're looking at here is called a pyogenic granuloma. Some people call it a pregnancy tumor. Now, don't worry, it's not cancer, but it's this really dramatic, localized swelling that can pop up during pregnancy. Basically, the hormonal changes make the gum tissue go into overdrive, and it just freaks out in response to any plaque.
And pregnancy isn't the only time this happens. Those same times of hormonal shifts during puberty or the menstrual cycle can also make gums extra sensitive. And then you have more serious conditions like poorly controlled diabetes, that's hyperglycemia, or even leukemia that can really ramp up that inflammatory response, making gum health way, way harder to manage.
And now we've arrived at the tipping point. This is the line in the sand. This is where the damage becomes permanent. When gingivitis is ignored, it can progress to periodontitis. And believe me, this is a whole different ballgame.
This diagram shows you exactly what's going on deep down below the gum line. The inflammation isn't just hanging out in the gums anymore. It's on a search and destroy mission for the structures that support your tooth. You can see these pockets forming, the tissue being destroyed, and most importantly, you can see that irreversible bone loss. The very foundation holding your tooth in place is literally dissolving away. And that devastating process leads us right to this stark fact. This destruction of bone is exactly why periodontitis is the #1 reason adults lose their teeth. It isn't cavities, it's the foundation crumbling away.
So how do dentists and hygienists even classify this level of damage? The old systems could be kind of confusing, but a newer approach gives us a much clearer, much more useful picture of a patient's situation, and it uses 2 simple ideas: staging and grading. It really boils down to this: stage and grade. And here's the easiest way to think about it. Staging is like dropping a pin on a map. It tells you the severity of the disease right now. It answers the question, where is the patient today? Grade, on the other hand, is like the speedometer in your car. It tells you how fast the disease is moving. It answers, how quickly is this damage happening? Using both gives us a complete picture of not just the damage that's been done, but also the risk for the future, which is so important for planning treatment. So we've established that the bone lost from periodontitis is gone for good. That is the hard truth of this disease. But does that mean it's a hopeless situation? Absolutely not. Not even close. It just means that managing it requires a total, lifelong shift in your mindset. This quote, well, it says it all, doesn't it? There's no cure for periodontitis in the sense that the bone will just grow back. Someone who's had it will always be at risk. And because of that, managing the disease becomes a lifelong commitment, a partnership to keep it from waking up and causing more destruction. So the goals of treatment really lay out a clear game plan. It all starts with the patient. It has to. Reinforcing excellent daily self-care is step 1. Then that's supported by professional cleanings to get all the deep-seated plaque and calculus out of there. From there, we can fix any other local issues. But all of this, it all funnels into the most critical step of all: sticking to a strict, lifelong maintenance plan to keep the disease in remission. And the results of that commitment, they can be incredible. I mean, look at this. On the left, you see active disease. But on the right, after therapy, the inflammation is gone. The tissues are firm, they look healthy. Sure, the bone that was lost is still gone, but the disease has been stopped in its tracks. A healthy, stable mouth is 100% achievable. And so this all brings us to the final and most important question. Now that you've seen the whole journey, from perfect health to the early warning signs, all the way to a manageable lifelong condition, you can see that the power to decide where you end up on that path is largely in your hands. So how are you going to protect your periodontal health?
Today, we are diving deep into the hidden causes of gum disease. We're going to talk about the surprising things that go way, way beyond just whether or not you're brushing and flossing. Let's get right into it. You know, most of us do, right? We're taught from when we're kids that if you just brush and floss, everything's going to be fine, your gums will be healthy. But what if I told you that even if you have perfect habits, there could be these secret accomplices hiding in your mouth just helping gum disease take hold? So, let's be clear. Plaque bacteria is absolutely the main cause of gum disease, no question about it. But it's not always working alone. I want you to think of plaque as the main villain in this story. And these other factors? Well, they're the partners in crime. They're the getaway drivers, the lookouts. They just make the villain's job a whole lot easier.
So, let's go on a little investigation together. We're going to pull back the curtain and uncover these secret accomplices. In the dental world, they have a name for them: local contributing factors.
Now, this is a really important distinction to make. These factors do not, I repeat, do not start gum disease. Plaque bacteria always starts the fire. But these things, they basically pour gasoline all over it. They create an environment where the disease can just explode, move faster, and be so much harder to get under control.
So our first category of these accomplices are what I like to call bacterial havens. You can probably guess what that means. These are places in your mouth where plaque can hide out, build up its forces, and just thrive, totally safe from your toothbrush and floss.
And the number one, the absolute king of bacterial havens, is calculus. You probably know it as tartar. Now, when you look at this picture, you might just think, oh, that's some staining. But it is so much more than that. This is plaque that has literally hardened up. It's mineralized, and it's become a rock-hard structure on the tooth.
And here's the crucial part. The calculus itself isn't the only problem. The real danger is that its surface is always covered by a fresh, living, breathing layer of active, disease-causing bacteria. You can't brush calculus off, which means you can't brush off the bacteria that are living on it either. It's totally protected.
This is a brilliant way to think about it. The surface of calculus isn't smooth at all. It's incredibly porous and rough. It's kind of like a loofah sponge. And that texture provides the perfect little home, the perfect scaffolding for new plaque to grab onto and start growing. It just makes the problem worse and worse.
So let's break down what this stuff is actually made of. As you can see, the vast majority of it, we're talking 70 to 90%, is made of hardened minerals, things like calcium phosphate. But that other 10 to 30%, well, that's organic material. And that includes dead cells and, you guessed it, living bacteria trapped inside that mineral cage.
Now, calculus is definitely the main hideout, but it's not the only one. Not by a long shot. Think about it. Deep grooves in your teeth, weird little anatomical features like enamel pearls, crowded teeth that are super tough to clean between, and yeah, even braces can all create these little nooks and crannies where bacteria just love to accumulate.
All right, let's move on to our next villain, and this one might actually surprise you a little bit. Sometimes the very dental work that was meant to fix a problem can accidentally create a brand new one.
There's a clinical term for this. It's called an iatrogenic factor. It's just a fancy way of saying it's a condition that was caused by a treatment. Now, of course, it's never intentional, but it's something that dentists and hygienists are always looking out for.
Take a look at this X-ray right here. You see how the edges of that dental work don't perfectly line up with the natural shape of the tooth? Those tiny little edges, those gaps, those rough margins, they are perfect hiding spots for plaque, and they make that area almost impossible for you to keep clean at home.
And some of the most common examples are things like fillings that have a little bit of an overhang, or crowns that are just too bulky and they crowd the gums, or even gaps between teeth where food is constantly getting jammed in there. All of these things just make it easier for plaque to set up shop.
Okay, our final villain works a little differently. It's not about giving bacteria a place to hide. Instead, it's all about weakening your mouth's defenses. And it all comes down to excessive physical force on your teeth and gums.
So your teeth are built to handle certain kinds of pressure. They're designed for what we call functional forces. That's just the normal act of chewing food. What they are not designed for is constant, non-stop tooth-on-tooth contact, which is known as parafunctional forces.
And this includes a lot of common habits, things like clenching your jaw when you're stressed, grinding your teeth at night, that's also called bruxism, or even stuff like mouth breathing, which can dry out your gum tissue and make it way more vulnerable to inflammation. Now, these forces don't cause gum disease by themselves, but if your gums are already inflamed, they can speed up the damage, especially bone loss.
So now, just imagine a scenario where all these villains decide to team up. Let's say someone has crowded teeth. That's villain number 1. And they have a few old fillings with overhangs. Villain number 2. And on top of all that, they grind their teeth at night. Villain number 3. You can see how this creates an absolute perfect storm where gum disease can just take off way more rapidly than it ever would from plaque alone.
Okay, so we've identified the bad guys. We've named the hidden villains. But here's the good news. You are not helpless here. Just knowing that these factors exist is the first, most powerful step you can take to fighting back and really becoming an advocate for your own health.
Here's a super simple 3-step action plan. First, just start paying attention to your own body. Do you ever wake up with a really sore jaw? That could be a sign of grinding. Second, have a real conversation with your dental team. Ask them directly, hey, how do my fillings look? Is everything okay with my bite? And third, you have to be consistent. You cannot remove calculus at home. Only a professional cleaning can do that, which makes it absolutely non-negotiable.
And really, this is the main takeaway. A healthy mouth is a partnership. Your daily brushing and flossing, that's your part of the deal. But identifying and managing all these other contributing factors, that requires a team. You bring the daily care and the awareness, and your dental team brings the professional expertise to spot and treat these issues.
So I'll leave you with this question. The next time you're brushing your teeth, don't just go through the motions. Take an extra 30 seconds to really look and listen. Are there spots that always seem to bleed no matter what? Places where your floss always shreds, or where food always gets stuck? Your mouth might be trying to tell you that one of these hidden villains is at play.
Hey everyone. You know, it's so easy to think of our mouth as, well, just our mouth. Something you deal with a toothbrush and some floss, right? But what if it's actually more like a window, a direct view into what's going on with your entire body's health? It's a pretty wild idea, so let's get right into it.
Okay, first up, look at this number, 51%. Just let that sink in for a second. That's a huge chunk. But 51% of what?
Of American adults. Over half of the entire adult population in the US is living with some kind of systemic disorder. We're talking about things like diabetes, heart disease, arthritis. These are chronic body-wide conditions. That's just a massive number of people. So you're probably thinking, okay, that's a big health stat, but what on earth does that have to do with my gums? And that right there is the million-dollar question we're going to unpack. Believe me, the connection is way more direct and, honestly, more fascinating than you probably think.
All right, let's talk about the mouth-body connection. And look, we're flipping the script here. A lot of times you hear about how gum disease can impact the rest of your body, but we're going the other way. We're looking at how conditions in your body can totally change the game inside your mouth, turning what should be a minor irritation into a serious, serious problem.
So where do we start? Let's dive into a big one, diabetes. This is a perfect example of how a condition inside your body can basically launch an all-out assault on your gums. Okay, this is so important. The key word here is uncontrolled. Get this. If your diabetes is well managed, your risk for gum disease isn't any higher. It's totally normal. But the moment your blood sugar goes off the rails, everything changes. It puts your whole body on high alert, creating what's called a hyperinflammatory response. And guess what's on the front line of that battle? Yep, your gums. So, you're asking, how does that even work? Well, it all boils down to this process called glycation. Picture this. All that extra sugar floating around in your blood starts to, well, literally sugarcoat important things like proteins. It's like caramelizing the machinery of your body. And this process creates these really nasty, harmful molecules. The name for them? Advanced glycation end products, or, wait for it, AGEs. Yeah, pretty fitting, right?
And these AGs are bad news. Think of them like little tripwires for inflammation, scattered all throughout your body. They latch onto your cells and basically scream, attack, attack, which triggers all this tissue destruction. So the key takeaway is that the high blood sugar itself is manufacturing the very weapons that turn against your own body.
Okay, so how does this play out specifically in your mouth? This diagram, it lays out the whole devastating chain reaction. It's called the age-rage pathway. Another great name, right? And it shows us exactly why poorly controlled diabetes is just so destructive for your gums. Let's break this down. Step 1, you've got bacteria. That's normal. Everyone has bacteria in their mouth. But then, step 2, high blood sugar starts pumping out those destructive AGE molecules we talked about. Now for the crazy part. Step 3, those AGs hook onto these special receptors on your cells, called rage receptors. And that's the trigger. It sets off this massive, sustained, totally exaggerated inflammatory alarm. And the result? Step 4, your body's repair systems get overwhelmed, they can't keep up, and the very tissues holding your teeth in place start to break down. It's a perfect storm. And this isn't just theory. We're talking about real numbers. For someone with diabetes, if their A1C creeps up over 8%, or their daily fingerstick reading is consistently over 180, that's the danger zone. That's the threshold where the risk for infection just skyrockets because the body's defenses are literally compromised by the sugar.
All right, so we've seen what sugar can do. But let's shift gears now and talk about two other really powerful internal factors, hormones and stress. Turns out they can also act as amplifiers for inflammation.
Think about it. Whether it's the chronic stress from work or just the natural hormonal changes that happen in life, your body is releasing all these chemicals. And those chemicals can make your gums super sensitive. The crazy thing is, you could have the exact same amount of plaque as always, but your body's reaction to it is suddenly dialed up to 11. Same trigger, way bigger, more damaging explosion. So let's look at chronic stress specifically. When you're stressed all the time, your body is just swimming in a hormone called cortisol. Now, cortisol is tricky. In short bursts, it can actually reduce inflammation. But when it's always there, it does the opposite. It suppresses your immune system. It basically ties your body's hands behind its back, making your mouth a much easier target for infection.
And what about hormones? They're constantly changing throughout our lives, and each stage brings its own set of challenges for our gums. You know, during puberty, all that increased blood flow can make gums really tender and sensitive. Then, during pregnancy, especially in the second and third trimesters, the body can go into overdrive, reacting dramatically to even a tiny bit of plaque. And later, during menopause, when estrogen levels drop, that's linked to bone loss all over the body, and that includes the jawbone that's anchoring your teeth. And this flowchart just lays it all out, plain and simple. You take lower estrogen levels during menopause, you add in the normal plaque that's always there, and boom, you get a chain reaction. It can lead directly to the destruction of the connective tissues and bone that support your teeth. It's a straight line from a hormonal shift to potential tooth loss. Okay, so we've seen how diabetes, stress, and hormones can really wreak havoc. It's a lot to take in. But the big question is, what do we do with this information? Let's shift from the what to the so what. How do we turn this knowledge into action? Because your mouth really is the front line of your health. It really comes down to a fundamental shift in how we think about dental care. The old way of thinking was the mouth is the mouth, it's totally separate, a cleaning is just for your teeth. But the modern view, the one that's backed by all this science, is completely different. It says your dental team is a crucial part of your overall healthcare team because your mouth is a billboard for what's happening in the rest of your body. So, what does this all mean for you, practically speaking? It's simple. First, talk to your dental team about your entire health history. Don't leave anything out. Second, really internalize that conditions like diabetes and even high stress are directly impacting your oral health. Third, work with your hygienist to manage those risks. And finally, start thinking of your dental checkups differently. They're not just cleanings anymore. They're health screenings, period. So I'll just leave you with this thought. Your body doesn't draw a line between your mouth and everything else, so why should me? Your mouth is constantly sending out signals about your deeper health. The real question is, are you listening?
Did you know that right now, every second of every day, there is an invisible war raging inside your body? You can't see it, you can't feel it, but your actual survival depends on it. Today, we're going to go behind the front lines and meet the silent, tireless defender that's keeping you alive, your immune system.
All right, take a look at this number, 100 million. Any idea what that could possibly be? I'll give you a hint. It's not the number of cells in your body or stars in the galaxy. Nope, it's something that happens to you every single day.
That's right. Over 100 million times a day, your body is attacked by germs. You're constantly surrounded by them. And the only reason you're not just sick all the time is thanks to the hero of our story. And that hero, of course, is the immune system. It's this incredibly complex network of cells, tissues, and proteins all working together to find and destroy any foreign invader that gets in. You can think of it as your own personal microscopic army. But here's the thing. This army isn't just some big chaotic blob of cells. No way. It's a highly organized, two-pronged defense force with two totally distinct branches that work in perfect harmony. So how is this army set up? Well, on one side, you've got your innate immune system. Think of this as the city's police force. They're always on patrol, ready to respond immediately to any general disturbance. It's fast, and it's what you're born with, but it doesn't have a memory. On the other side is the adaptive immune system. These are your elite special forces. They take a little longer to deploy the first time because they're literally training for a specific enemy. And here's the amazing part. They remember every single enemy they've ever fought. This means if that threat ever comes back, the response is going to be way faster and way stronger. So, who are the actual soldiers in this army? Let's meet some of the key players. You know, the cellular defenders out there on the front lines doing all the dirty work. First up, the neutrophils. These guys are the absolute first responders. The second an alarm goes off, they flood the scene. They're basically kamikaze warriors. They engulf and destroy invaders, and then they die. And fun fact, they're the main component of what we all know as pus. Arriving a little bit later to the party are the macrophages. Look, if neutrophils are the sprinters, macrophages are definitely the marathon runners. They're larger, they live a lot longer, and they act as the heavy-duty cleanup crew.
They're absolutely crucial for handling those longer, more chronic battles. And now for the special forces of that adaptive system we mentioned, the lymphocytes. These are the real strategists, the brains of the entire operation. There are two main types, B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes, but for now, let's just focus on one of them.
Okay, so B lymphocytes. You can think of these as the body's mobile weapon factories. As soon as they identify a specific enemy, their one and only job is to just start churning out these highly specialized weapons designed to fight it. And those weapons are called antibodies.
And these antibodies aren't just any old weapons. Oh no, they're more like precision-guided missiles, each one designed for a single specific target. So let's take a closer look at this incredible antibody arsenal. What's really cool is their shape. Antibodies are these clever Y-shaped proteins. They just float around in your bloodstream, and when they find their specific target, say a virus, they latch right on. What they're doing is effectively painting a giant bullseye on the invader, making it super obvious for other immune cells to find and destroy.
Antibodies basically have three main superpowers. First, they can neutralize threats directly, kind of like blocking the key a virus needs to get into your cells. Second, they coat bacteria in a process called opsonization, which really just makes them tastier and easier for those macrophages to eat. And third, they can call for some serious heavy-duty backup by activating something called the complement system.
And this is where it gets really cool. That third superpower doesn't just call for a little backup. It unleashes this powerful cascade of proteins that complements the work of the antibodies, which, yep, is exactly where it gets its name.
This diagram here shows the process really well. The complement system is a whole team of proteins that, once activated, creates this massive domino effect. They can destroy pathogens directly by punching holes right through them. That's a process called lysis. They also amplify that coding process we mentioned, opsonization, and they trigger an inflammatory response to recruit even more defenders to the fight. And finally, they help with clearance, cleaning up the whole mess after the battle is won.
But all this power comes with a pretty big risk. The immune system is incredibly destructive by design, so its power has to be perfectly balanced. Too little, and you're defenseless. Too much, and this powerful army can actually turn on its own country.
The crucial point here is that sometimes the system just gets confused. Its intensity becomes a liability, and as this quote explains, it can begin to harm the very body that it's designed to protect in the first place.
And you can see the two extremes of that failure right here. On one side, you have a weak or deficient immune system, like what happens in HIV/AIDS. This leaves the body totally vulnerable to common germs a healthy person would fight off easily. But on the other side, you've got the opposite problem, an overzealous immune system that attacks the body's own cells, which is what leads to autoimmune diseases. So this invisible army is in a constant balancing act, a high-stakes tightrope walk between protection and self-destruction. And that really leaves us with a critical question to think about. What can we do to help our defenders maintain that delicate, life-sustaining balance? All right, today we're going to take a journey into a hidden world, a bustling metropolis that exists inside every single one of us. We're talking about the microscopic city on your teeth. Yep, oral biofilms. And we're going to start with a feeling I bet is super familiar to you. You know what I'm talking about, right? That feeling when you run your tongue over your teeth, maybe first thing in the morning, and they feel a little, well, fuzzy. What in the world is that stuff? Well, I can tell you it's not just bits of last night's dimmer. What you're actually feeling is a biofilm, a living, breathing, highly organized community of bacteria. They're working together, they're building structures. It is literally a city, and this incredible image from an electron microscope shows you exactly what it looks like up close. See, bacteria are pretty social creatures. They rarely just float around on their own. They much prefer to live all together in these really complex communities called biofilms. And it's not just on your teeth. They build these cities on almost any surface you can imagine, from a rock in a stream to the inside of your water bottles.
So, who exactly are the residents of this city? Well, like any big metropolis, you've got all different kinds of citizens. You've got the good guys who help keep things healthy. And then you have the potential troublemakers that can cause some serious problems. Let's meet the two main groups. The main way scientists tell them apart is with something called a gram stain. First, you've got gram-positive bacteria. They stain purple. They have a single, thick cell wall, and these are generally our good citizens, the ones you find in a healthy mouth. But on the other side, you've got gram-negative bacteria. They stain red, and they have this more complex, double-layered cell wall. That extra layer contains toxins, which is a huge reason they're linked to gum disease. And this illustration shows us the difference perfectly. So, over on the left, you see the gram-positive guy with that simpler, thick purple wall. But now look at the gram-negative one on the right. See that extra outer membrane? That double-layer setup makes it way more resilient, and that's a key reason it can cause so many problems. Okay, so how does this city go from, an empty lot, a perfectly clean tooth, to a thriving metropolis? Well, the most amazing part is just how fast it happens. This isn't a project that takes years. We're talking about a city built in a matter of days, sometimes even hours. Just look at this timeline. Within minutes of cleaning your teeth, the first free-floating bacteria arrive and attach. These are your pioneer settlers. Then, in just 2 to 4 hours, they're not just hanging on anymore, they've formed strong little microcolonies. And between 6 and 12 hours, things get really serious. They start building that protective slime layer, the city walls. And by the 2 to 4 day mark, bam, you have a fully mature biofilm, a fortress that is incredibly tough to take down. So now that the city is built, let's take a look inside. Let's explore its incredible defenses. Because this isn't just a random pile of germs, it's a highly sophisticated structure designed for one thing and one thing only: survival. And it has 3 brilliant defense strategies. Okay, defense number 1 is that slime layer we just talked about, the extracellular matrix. Think of this gooey stuff as a physical shield that cocoons all the bacteria. It's tough for bigger things, like our own immune cells, to even get through. And in a really mature biofilm, it can even block smaller things, like the antimicrobials in mouthwash. Second, they have each other's backs. It's mutual protection. The citizens of this city protect one another. And get this, if some of the bacteria are resistant to an antibiotic, they can actually pump out enzymes that break down the antibiotic, protecting all their non-resistant neighbors nearby. It's the ultimate teamwork. And the third defense, this might just be the cleverest one of all, it's hibernation. Bacteria way down in the deepest, most protected layers of the biofilm can basically just go to sleep. They go dormant. Now, here's the kicker. Antibiotics are designed to attack active reproducing bacteria. So these little sleeper cells, they're completely unaffected. They just wait for the attack to be over. I love this picture because it just nails the idea, right? While all this chaos and antibiotic assault is happening up on the surface, these guys are deep inside, totally safe, just sleeping right through it. And once the coast is clear, they wake up and are ready to repopulate and rebuild the whole city. So, for the most part, this bacterial city can live in harmony with us. It's a normal part of our body. But what happens when we just leave it alone for too long? That's when the balance can tip, and that peaceful community can turn into a serious source of disease. So here's the key idea. A healthy mouth is in a state of symbiosis. Everything's in balance. No one type of bacteria is taking over. But if that biofilm isn't regularly broken up, it matures and thickens, and that leads to an imbalance called dysbiosis. And that's the tipping point where the more dangerous disease-causing bacteria can really take over and thrive. And dysbiosis isn't just some tiny microscopic problem. It has real, visible consequences. This thick white coating on the tongue, that is a perfect example of a mature, out-of-balance biofilm. This is the kind of imbalance that leads to gingivitis, and if it's left to get worse, the much more serious gum disease, periodontitis. So we've got this incredibly resilient, intelligent fortress living right on our teeth, protected by slime shields, teamwork, and an army of sleeper cells. How in the world do we fight back? How do we bring down those walls? I mean, really think about it. We are up against a structure that's physically shielded, where the residents protect each other, and that has a reserve army that can just sleep through an attack. You'd think the answer has to be some kind of powerful chemical attack, right? Like antibiotics, or some super strong mouthwash. Well, not really. Get a load of this number. Research has shown that to kill bacteria living inside a biofilm, you might need an antibiotic dose up to 1,500 times higher than what it takes to kill the exact same bacteria when they're just free-floating. That's how good their fortress is. A chemical assault alone just isn't going to cut it. So, what's the answer? What's the secret weapon? It is so simple, it's almost unbelievable. The only truly effective way to control oral biofilm is mechanical disruption. It's not a chemical solution, it's a physical one. We're talking about brushing and flossing. So, the next time you're brushing your teeth, I want you to remember this. You're not just cleaning away a little leftover food.
You are physically tearing down the walls of a microscopic city. Your toothbrush isn't just for cleaning, it's a wrecking ball. And it's the only thing that really keeps that bacterial metropolis in check.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into a really interesting topic, gum disease. Now I know, it affects millions of people, but what we're going to explore is why it's so incredibly personal, and how your oral health is this constant, really delicate balancing act.
So let's just jump right in with a puzzle that has probably confused a lot of us, maybe even some dentists. Have you ever wondered how one person can, barely brush their teeth and seem to have perfectly fine gums, while someone else is just meticulous, brushing, flossing, the whole 9 yards, and they're constantly fighting severe gum problems? What in the world is going on there?
Well, the answer isn't as simple as a checklist of good versus bad habits. It's actually all about this dynamic balance of forces that's happening inside your mouth, literally right now. And this concept has a name. It's called biologic equilibrium.
Okay, so what does this balancing act actually look like? Let's break down the forces that are at play on either side of this scale.
Essentially, you can think of your body as constantly working to stay stable, to keep things in check. And when it comes to your mouth, this equilibrium, this balance, happens when the amount of harmful bacteria is at a level that your body's own defense systems can handle without breaking a sweat.
In this image here, it's the perfect way to visualize it. On one side of the scale, you've got what we'll call disease factors. That's things like bacteria building up, which we call biofilm, and other risk factors. And on the other side, you've got the health factors. That's your own immune system, your good habits, and of course, help from your dental team.
You see, as long as these two sides are more or less in balance, you're in a state of health. It's when one side starts to get heavier, when those disease factors start to outweigh the health factors, well, that's when the scale tips, and that's when the trouble starts.
All right, so what exactly are these weights that can tip the scales and throw your whole mouth out of balance? Well, these are what we call risk factors.
Now, here's what's really interesting. Not all risk factors are created equal. They actually fall into two very different categories, as you can see right here. Modifiable, meaning you can actually do something about them, and non-modifiable, which are pretty much out of your control.
And understanding this difference is absolutely crucial. Modifiable factors are things like your habits, smoking, your diet, even your stress levels. Non-modifiable factors, on the other hand, are the things you're kind of stuck with. Your genetics, your age, things like that.
Let's see this in action. Take a really powerful modifiable risk factor, like smoking. Adding that to the equation is like dropping a heavy weight right onto the disease side of the scale. All of a sudden, it's so much harder for your health factors to keep things in balance. And of course, it's not just smoking. A poor diet, a lot of chronic stress, certain medications, or even something as simple as a badly shaped filling. All of these things can add little bits of weight to that disease side, making your body's job that much harder.
Now, what about the things you can't change? Let's see how that looks. A non-modifiable factor, like say, a genetic predisposition for gum disease. Well, that adds its own heavy weight. And this right here explains why some people just seem to be naturally more susceptible no matter how good their habits are.
Other things in this category include your age, major hormonal shifts like during pregnancy, or certain systemic diseases. Think of these as weights that are already on the scale from the get-go, which just means you have to work a little harder on the health side to keep things balanced.
So when the scales do tip towards disease, it can feel a little, overwhelming, right? Especially if you have some of those non-modifiable risks. But the most important thing to remember is that this balance can always be restored.
This is what it looks like when things are out of equilibrium. You can see the disease factors, the bacteria, the risk factors, maybe a weakened immune response, are now weighing more than the health factors, like your daily care and professional help. The scale has tipped.
But the good news is, we have a game plan. We can fight back. The whole strategy is to start systematically adding weight back onto the health side of the scale. How do you do that? You reduce or get rid of those modifiable risks, you step up your self-care to control the bacteria, and you increase how often you get professional care.
And that leads us to a really critical question. What if you're dealing with one of those big, powerful, non-modifiable risks like your own genetics? You can't just take that weight off the scale. So, what do you do then?
You compensate. That's the answer. You can't remove that genetic weight from the disease side, but you can absolutely pile on more weight to the health side. That just means being even more on top of your game with self-care and working more closely with your dental team to add enough positive factors to counteract the negative ones. You can bring that scale back to level.
Since everyone's combination of risk factors and health factors is completely unique to them, the absolute key to long-term health is understanding your own personal risk profile.
And this, right here, brings us to maybe the most important takeaway of all. The only way to truly know what's on your scale is through a formal clinical risk assessment. This is something your dental professional can do to give you a clear, totally personalized picture of your oral health.
And we're not just talking about a quick peek in your mouth. As you can see here, a proper assessment is a real deep dive. It looks at everything from your age, your full medical history, your dental history, and it combines all of that with a very thorough clinical exam.
Your dental team will evaluate everything from tobacco use and potential genetic markers to how much plaque you have and how much your gums are bleeding. This whole process lets them see exactly what weights are on both sides of your scale, and then they can classify you as low risk or high risk and create a care plan that is perfectly tailored just for you.
And that brings us right back to where we started. Your oral health is your own, unique, personal balancing act. The first and most powerful step you can take towards a lifetime of health is simply understanding what factors are tipping your scale. So it might be a really good idea to ask your dental professional about your personal risk assessment at your next visit.
All right, we're about to play detective and solve a bit of a medical mystery. It's one that often starts with a sudden, throbbing pain right in your mouth. So in this explainer, we're going to break down what that pain really means, where it's coming from, and most importantly, why ignoring it is a risk you just can't afford to take. Let's get into it.
You know the feeling, right? It's that jolt that just stops you in your tracks. You're minding your own business, and then, bam, this sharp, impossible-to-ignore pain. I think we've all been there. And yeah, it's an awful feeling, but it's also your body trying to tell you something important.
Because that pain, as alarming as it is, isn't just some random event. Think of it like your body's own high-tech alarm system. It's sending out a super urgent distress signal that something is wrong and needs your attention, like right now.
So, what makes this kind of pain different from a dull ache you've had for a while? Well, the key is right there in the word acute. And that's not just a descriptive word, it's a specific medical term that tells us a whole lot about what's actually going on inside your body. Okay, so here's the official definition. But let's look at the key phrases: sudden onset and rapid progression. This isn't some problem that's been slowly brewing for months. Whoa, acute conditions pop up fast and they get worse just as fast, which is exactly why they almost always come with some serious pain.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, when you put acute and chronic side by side. An acute abscess is kind of like a pressure cooker that's been left on the stove. The pressure builds up fast, it's really painful, and there's no release valve. A chronic one, on the other hand, is more like a slow leak. It might not even hurt much, because the body has found a way to create a little drainage channel, that's the sinus tract, to let some of the pressure out. So that really intense pain? That's a huge clue we're dealing with an acute problem.
Okay, so if the pain is the fire alarm, what's the actual fire? Well, in a lot of these cases, the main culprit is something called a periodontal abscess. Let's unpack exactly what that is.
This picture does a fantastic job of showing what's happening. See, an abscess is basically your body's attempt to quarantine an infection. When nasty bacteria get into places they shouldn't be, your immune system rushes to the scene. And in an effort to contain these invaders, it literally walls them off, creating this little contained pocket of infection.
So what's inside that little walled-off pocket? The fancy term is suppuration. But, yeah, we all know it as pus. And yeah, it might seem gross, but it's actually the evidence of a fierce battle. It's literally made up of the fallen soldiers, your dead white blood cells, along with the enemy bacteria and all the other debris from the fight.
And this is what it looks like in the real world. Remember that pressure cooker we were talking about? When it finally finds a way to release that pressure, this is the result. And let me tell you, that is an undeniable sign of a very active infection that needs to be dealt with immediately.
So, besides the really obvious pain, your body might be sending you other signals. You could notice swelling, or maybe it hurts to chew. You might have this persistent bad taste in your mouth, or maybe a tooth even feels a little loose. But this last one on the list, a fever. That is a major red flag. That's your body telling you the infection isn't just a local problem anymore, it might actually be spreading.
All right, now our medical mystery gets a little plot twist, because not all abscesses are created equal. To treat it correctly, a dental professional has to figure out exactly where the infection started.
And this is the million-dollar question they have to answer. Is the infection starting in the tissues around the tooth, the gums and the bone? That's periodontal. Or is it's starting from way deep inside the tooth's nerve chamber, which is called the pulp. So, how do they solve this puzzle? Well, they have a whole list of diagnostic clues. One of the biggest tests is for vitality. Basically, is the tooth's nerve still alive? In a periodontal abscess, it usually is, but in a pulpal one, it's usually not. They'll also look at x-rays to see where bone loss is happening and ask you about the pain. A constant, localized pain often points to a periodontal issue, but a pain that's kind of vague and hard to pinpoint might suggest a pulpal problem.
And just when you think it couldn't get more complicated, well, sometimes it's both. It's called an endodontic periodontal lesion, or EPL. This is when an infection from the nerve spreads to the gums, or the other way around. It's a true combination problem, and it takes a really careful, strategic approach to even have a chance at saving the tooth.
We've talked about the clues, we've talked about the diagnosis, but now we need to get serious and talk about the stakes. What actually happens if you ignore that pain, if you just decide to tough it out?
Look, if you take away only one thing from this entire explainer, let it be this. An infection in your mouth does not always stay in your mouth. It can use your bloodstream as a highway to get to the rest of your body.
And listen, this isn't to scare you, it's just to inform you of the reality. An untreated oral abscess has been linked to some incredibly severe, even life-threatening conditions. We're talking about infections spreading to the brain, causing flesh-eating bacteria in the neck, or leading to severe breathing problems. This is exactly why acting fast is so critical.
A picture like this really drives the point home, doesn't it? I mean, this level of swelling and inflammation isn't just a minor issue, it's a 5-alarm fire. It's the body screaming that it is being completely overwhelmed by a major infection.
Okay, so after all that pretty serious talk, let's pivot to the solution. What's your game plan? What do you do when you get that first signal of sudden pain in your mouth?
It's actually a pretty simple 3-step plan. First, just acknowledge the message your body is sending you. Don't try to dismiss it. Second, see a dentist right away. This is not a wait-and-see kind of thing. It's a legitimate dental emergency. And third, always remember that what happens in your mouth is absolutely connected to the health of your entire body.
So we'll leave you with this one thought. Your oral health isn't separate from your overall health. It's truly a window into it. The real question is, are you paying close attention and looking after both? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.
Today, let's talk about something we don't always think about when we look in the mirror. Not just our teeth, but our gums. It turns out they've got a whole story to tell, and it pretty much happens in 3 chapters, from perfectly healthy to at risk to seriously in trouble. So you know that moment, right? You're done brushing your teeth, you spit into the sink, and you see that little tinge of pink. It's so easy to just rinse it away and not think twice about it. But here's the thing, that's actually the very first signal from your body, a little heads up that something is starting to change. And this gets right down to it. That whole support system for your teeth, the fancy term for it is the periodontium, can really only be in one of 3 basic states. That's it. You've got health, you've got the warning sign, which is gingivitis, and then you've got the serious one, periodontitis. So let's really dive into what each of those actually looks like.
First up, let's talk about state number 1. This is the goal. This is the gold standard we're all shooting for, right? A truly healthy foundation for your teeth. And not just what you see on the surface, but deep down where it really counts.
Okay, check this out. On the left, that's what healthy gums look like from the outside, what you'd see in the mirror. But on the right, that's where it gets really interesting. We're zooming way in. See in that diagram how the bone is high and tight against the tooth? And all those little fibers, the ligaments, are holding it all snug? Everything is solid. Everything is exactly where you want it to be.
So, let's put some labels on this. What does healthy actually mean? Well, your gums are going to be pink and firm. Super important, they do not bleed when you brush or floss. And underneath all that, the alveolar bone, that's the bone that literally holds your teeth in, is completely untouched. The periodontal ligament, which kind of acts like a tiny shock absorber, also perfectly intact. And that seal right around the tooth is nice and high, creating a really tight barrier. All right, let's move on to state number 2. And this is where that pink in the sink comes from. We're talking about gingivitis. The best way to think about it is like an alarm bell going off. Your body's basically shouting, hey, we've got a bacterial problem starting down here, but you can still do something about it.
And this right here is the single most important thing you need to know about gingivitis. Look at that word, reversible. Seriously, that's the whole game right now. The infection is only in the soft gum tissue. It hasn't reached the bone yet, and that means any damage at this stage can be completely turned around with good hygiene and professional care. It's not too late.
So let's put them side by side. Healthy, pink and firm. Gingivitis, now we're seeing red and swollen. And that bleeding we talked about, yeah, now it's likely to happen. But, and this is so important, look at what hasn't changed. The bone is still intact. The ligament is still intact. The foundation is holding, but it's definitely under stress.
Let's go back under the microscope for a sec. On the left, you've got that tight, healthy seal we saw before. Now look to the right at the gingivitis picture. You can literally see the tissue is swollen, and some of those little connecting fibers have started to break down. This creates a small pocket where more bacteria can hide. But, and I can't stress this enough, look at the bottom. The bone is still untouched. The alarm is blaring, but the house isn't on fire yet.
And you might be wondering how long this takes. Well, it happens fast. We're talking plaque starts building up, and just 4 days later, this process can kick off. By about 2 weeks, you can often see the visible signs, that redness and swelling. It's a really quick and direct reaction to that bacteria just sitting there.
Okay, so this is where our story takes a much more serious turn. If those warning signs of gingivitis are ignored, the infection progresses to the third and final state, periodontitis. This is the point where the damage becomes permanent and irreversible. Yeah, periodontitis is a completely different animal. The infection has now broken through the gum line and is attacking all parts of your tooth's foundation, the ligaments, the surface of the root, and most critically, the bone. The damage that happens from here on out, your body can't just undo it.
And wow, you don't need a microscope to see the difference here. On the left, that healthy foundation we started with. On the right, that's the devastating result of advanced periodontitis. The gums have receded, the roots are exposed, the damage is it's profound.
So if you remember just one thing, make it this. Gingivitis is inflammation of the gums, period. Periodontitis is when that inflammation crosses a line and starts to permanently destroy the bone that your teeth are anchored into. That is the fundamental difference. That's the point of no return.
So how exactly does this happen? Well, the destruction isn't random. The inflammation actually follows a couple of specific pathways as it eats away at the bone. Understanding this really helps us see how the damage occurs.
The most common pattern is called horizontal bone loss. Just think of it as the path of least resistance. The inflammation starts in the soft gum tissue, then it spreads sideways into the bone, and only then does it move down into the ligament space. This usually results in a fairly even overall drop in the bone height.
But then there's another, more destructive pattern, vertical bone loss. In this case, the inflammation takes a shortcut. It moves from the soft tissue straight down into the ligament space first, and from there, it attacks the bone from the side. This carves out these deep, trench-like defects right next to the tooth root, which can be much harder to treat.
Okay, so we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? The 3 states. But how common is all this, really? Let's zoom out from the microscope and look at the real-world impact, because the numbers, well, they might just surprise you.
47.2%. Let that sink in for a second. According to the CDC, that's how many American adults over the age of 30 have some form of periodontitis. That's nearly 1 out of every 2 people. This is not some rare condition.
And look how dramatically that risk goes up with age. By the time you're 65, that number jumps to over 70%. 70! So for older adults, having this disease is actually the majority experience. It's one of the most widespread chronic diseases out there, period. And this quote really drives home the tough reality of treatment. It makes it crystal clear. While treatment can stop the disease from getting worse, it doesn't bring back the bone you've already lost. The goal of therapy is to stabilize the foundation you have left, not to rebuild it to what it once was.
When it comes down to it, our gums are the literal foundation for our teeth. And just like any foundation, they can go from being rock solid to showing a few cracks to crumbling away. The journey from health to gingivitis is reversible, but that step into periodontitis is not. So the real question is, which state is your foundation in, and what are you doing to protect it?
Have you ever just stopped to think about your teeth? I mean, really think about how they can handle crunching down on a hard apple or a tough steak without just popping out. Well, it's not magic. It's an incredible, mostly invisible, biological system at work. So today, let's uncover the secrets of your tooth's amazing support system.
Seriously, just for a second, your teeth withstand some incredible forces every single day. So what's the secret? What's really going on in there that gives them that incredible stability?
You might think your teeth are just kind of fused directly to your jawbone, like a nail in a piece of wood, but the truth is so much more fascinating than that. They're actually supported by this sophisticated, living system, and the bone is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
And here it is, our unsung hero, the periodontium. That's the official name for this incredible support crew that keeps your teeth in place. It's a team, you see, made of 4 distinct tissues all working in perfect harmony. And we're about to meet every single one of them.
Okay, our journey into the periodontum starts with the part you already know, the part you see every time you smile, the gingiva. Think of it as the first line of defense, the vigilant gatekeeper for your teeth.
What we all just call our gums, that's the gingiva. And its biggest job is to create this super tight collar right around the neck of each tooth. You can see in this diagram how that pink tissue forms a protective seal, shielding all the deeper, more sensitive structures from the outside world.
And that seal is so important. It really is a barrier, protecting everything underneath from all the stuff going on in your mouth. It also covers the bone and is tough enough to hold itself against the tooth, even with all the force of you chewing your food.
Now get this, the gingiva isn't just one uniform tissue. There's the free gingiva, which is that little unattached collar at the very edge of your tooth. But then you have the attached gingiva. And this stuff is the real workhorse. It is firmly locked down to the bone and is specifically designed to withstand all the mechanical forces from chewing.
So, how much of this tough, attached gingiva do we actually have? Well, in your upper jaw, what's called the maxilla, it can be up to 4.5 millimeters wide. I know, that doesn't sound like a lot, does it? But that little band of reinforced tissue provides some seriously essential protection.
And here's the bottom line. The next time you bite into a crunchy carrot or some nuts, you can thank that little band of attached gingiva. It's what's preventing the sheer force of chewing from literally ripping your gums away from your teeth. Kind of important, right?
All right, let's go a little deeper now, past the gingiva, to find something truly amazing. See, your teeth aren't rigidly fused to your jaw at all. No, they're held in place by this remarkable suspension system. This is the periodontal ligament, or PDL for short. It's a whole network of tiny fibers that connect the tooth to the bone. But it's not like glue. It's more like a tiny trampoline or a shock absorber that gives your tooth just a little bit of cushion. Isn't that incredible? So its job is really 2 things. Number 1, to hold the tooth in the socket. And number 2, to absorb the immense pressures from biting and chewing. It allows for this tiny, almost imperceptible amount of movement. And this perfectly illustrates why it matters so much. Without that cushion, the simple act of chewing would be like a hammer blow, a jarring, damaging experience for both your teeth and your jawbone. The PDL is what dissipates all those forces safely. So, we have this amazing ligament, but what exactly is it attached to? Well, that brings us to the deep foundation of our whole system, the bony anchor. On one side, we have something called the cementum, which is a specialized layer covering the tooth's root. And on the other side, we have the alveolar bone, which is what forms the tooth socket in your jaw. Together, they create the ultimate anchor for this whole system. First up, the cementum. This is a thin, hard layer that's basically painted onto the root of the tooth. Its main job is to be the attachment point, the surface that all those fibers from the periodontal ligament can grip onto. And on the other end of those fibers, you have the alveolar bone. This is the part of your jawbone that actually forms the tooth socket. You can think of it as the house that the tooth root lives in. So you see the partnership here, right? The alveolar bone makes the sturdy socket, the cementum on the tooth provides the grippable surface, and the PDL stretches between them, holding everything securely but flexibly in place. Okay, let's zoom out and just appreciate the brilliance of this entire setup. We've met the 4 key players, but their true genius is in how they work together as a single, cohesive unit. It's really this elegant, 4-part harmony. The gingiva creates the protective seal. The PDL acts as the resilient cushion. The cementum gives you the anchor on the tooth itself, and the alveolar bone forms the sturdy socket. Seal, cushion, anchor, socket. It's just a perfect system.
Which brings us right back to our original definition. Now, when you read this, it means so much more, doesn't it? It's not just a collection of tissues, it's a truly functional, interconnected system where every single part has a critical role to play.
So, the next time you smile, just remember, it's not just about your teeth. It's about this incredible, intricate support system that keeps them healthy and strong. Now that you understand how this amazing system works, the real question is, what are you going to do to protect it?